Chapter 51:37. What exactly happened here? For the past 3 days, there has been an endless rumbling of thunder in the void, but there is no tribulation cloud at all. Even the heavenly Tao lightning tribulation can't be like this. On the contrary, the legendary primordial lightning tribulation happens to be like this. Could it be that there is actually an existence in seclusion on this inconspicuous abandoned star? Moreover, he has successfully broken through and stepped into the primordial Tao realm after the heavenly Tao, and the primordial lightning tribulation is about to descend? Perhaps that is the case. After all, after ancestor Hong Ke refined the 9 heavenly Tao treasure liquid a million years ago, many heavenly Tao ferocious beasts and survivors of the heavenly Tao provided him with the heavenly Tao origin liquid and asked him to refine the 9 heavenly Tao treasure liquid. It said that during that period of time, many peak-grade ferocious beasts and peak-grade survivors at the peak of the 9th stage obtained the 9 heavens great path's precious elixir needed to break through. From then on, they left and found a place to cultivate in seclusion to break through to the primordial great path after the heavenly path. Perhaps this inconspicuous abandoned planet happens to have an existence from back then. If that is the case, the situation on both sides of the Milky Way will change drastically. Now, whether it is the right bank or the left bank, there is not a single true primordial Tao realm expert. Once an existence of this level appears, the significance and far-reaching impact are simply unimaginable and immeasurable. I just don't know where this existence came from. Is he a ferocious beast or a survivor? In my opinion, this matter shouldn't be so simple. Although this old man has never seen the primordial lightning tribulation before, according to the old man's knowledge, its might shouldn't be like this. However, the power of the lightning tribulation that invisibly enveloped this abandoned star is definitely not the lightning tribulation of the heavenly Tao. If you think about it carefully, it should be between the two. The power level between the heavenly Tao lightning tribulation and the primordial lightning tribulation? In that case, wouldn't that be the primordial pill tribulation? But how is that possible? Even the 9 heavenly Tao treasure liquid refined by ancestor Hong Ke wasn't able to cause the primordial pill tribulation to descend. Could it be that there is actually an existence in this world who can already refine a primordial medicine that is more effective than the 9 heavenly Tao treasure liquid? I've never heard of this before. How could it suddenly appear without warning? Hong Tao, the leader of the Chaos Lac Star area, furrowed his brows even tighter as he listened to the discussions that were going on everywhere like a tidal wave. He naturally saw that there was something strange about the primordial lightning tribulation that enveloped the abandoned star in front of him. To be precise, this should indeed be the primordial pill tribulation, but how was that possible? Brain as these thoughts flashed through his mind, he subconsciously thought of the master of the magic hall, Yi Xian. After all, Yi Xian had just obtained the refinement method for the 9 heavenly Tao elixir left behind by ancestor Hong Ke in the Chaos Lac star field. If nothing unexpected happened, he should have comprehended it by now. However, even if he had fully comprehended the secret method of refining the heavenly 9 great Tao treasure liquid, and had even successfully refined a batch of the heavenly 9 great Tao treasure liquid, it was impossible for it to attract the primordial pill tribulation. The heavenly 9 great Tao elixir created by Patriarch Hong Ke was indeed effective on the primordial chaos Tao realm experts who were at the peak of the 9th step of the heavenly Tao realm. However, this effect was far from being able to attract the primordial chaos pill tribulation. Hong Tao was certain of this. Just as he was feeling doubtful and unable to understand what was happening in front of him, a figure suddenly rushed out from the abandoned star 100 billion kilometers in front of him. It was Yi Xian. The moment he saw Yi Xian's figure, Hong Tao's breathing suddenly stopped. His eyes widened so much that they almost popped out of their sockets. With a face full of shock, he suddenly exclaimed, "The master of the magic hall, Yi Xian? This is impossible." Boom! 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 At this moment, just as Yi Xian's figure rushed out of the star core and into the dark void outside the star, the primordial pill tribulation, which had finished accumulating power, finally, fully descended. In an instant, the roar of thunder shook the heavens, but there was not a single tribulation cloud in the sky, nor was there a single thunderbolt exploding, nor was there a single bolt of tribulation lightning striking down. Everything was like an illusion. On the surface, it did not seem to exist, but in reality, there was a formless and terrifying force that had unknowingly locked onto Yi Xian's figure and aura. He was the derivator of the perfect pill formula for the level 31 primordial Tao elixir. Therefore, the primordial pill tribulation this time had locked onto Yi Xian. Thus the so-called primordial pill tribulation referred to the tribulation lightning that descended when the primordial Tao elixir was refined. However, The Heavenly Tao Elixir and the Primordial Tao Elixir were no small matter. Therefore, even if one had only derived the perfect pill formula for these two types of Primordial Tao Elixir and had not refined the Primordial Tao Elixir, there would still be a pill tribulation. Previously, when Yi Xian had derived the perfect pill formula for the level 30 Heavenly Tao Elixir, the Heavenly Tao of the primordial world had sensed it and sent down a Heavenly Tao pill tribulation. Thus, today, he had also derived the perfect pill formula for the level 31 Primordial Tao Elixir. Therefore, the Primordial Pill Tribulation had been triggered. Since it was a pill tribulation, the power of the lightning tribulation naturally could not be compared to the real primordial lightning tribulation. However, it was definitely not comparable to the Heavenly Tao lightning tribulation. Its power was between the Heavenly Tao lightning tribulation and the primordial lightning tribulation. Therefore, previously, Yi Xian had taken advantage of the situation and used the primordial heavenly punishment to scheme against the dragon whale and the primeval heaven's eye. With Yi Xian's current terrifying cultivation, if there was only one primordial pill tribulation of this power, he would at most be lightly injured. However, it was impossible to say that he would be seriously injured. Because of this, after estimating that the commotion outside the abandoned planet for the past 3 days should have attracted most of the ferocious beast forbidden grounds and the Heavenly Tao experts in the remnant star region on the left bank and right bank, without hesitation, he waved his hand and put away the Shenong cauldron that was suspended above his head. After that, he immediately rushed out of the core of the isolated planet. At this moment, as he rushed out, his figure appeared. In the next instant, he was enveloped by an invisible force. Amidst the earth-shattering roar, Yi Xian's figure seemed to have been struck by lightning. He suddenly froze in the void and almost spat out a mouthful of blood. However, there was only one pill tribulation. After a wave of power poured out, everything stopped. The violent and raging invisible energy disappeared without a trace in an instant. It was at this moment that the thousands of Heavenly Tao ferocious beasts and the remnant citizens gathered in the void finally saw his figure. After a moment of dead silence, a wave of gasps rang out. All the Heavenly Tao ferocious beasts and the remnant citizens trembled violently. Their expressions changed drastically as they cried out involuntarily. Especially Hong Tao's exclamation of shock from before. It had undoubtedly instantly allowed everyone to know who exactly this existence that had charged out from the abandoned star and forcefully resisted the primordial pill tribulation was. At this moment, Yi Xian was the focus of everyone's attention. The illustrious name of the master of the magic hall could be said to be like the sun in the sky. As Yi Xian's figure charged out from the core of the abandoned star and forcefully resisted the power of the primordial pill tribulation that had unknowingly locked onto his aura, the thousands of Heavenly Tao beasts and survivors that were gathered in the surrounding space finally saw his figure. At this moment, Yi Xian was the focus of everyone's attention. The illustrious name of the master of the magic hall could be said to be like the sun in the sky. Everyone knew who the existence that rushed out of the abandoned planet and resisted the primordial pill tribulation head-on was. After a short moment of dead silence, a wave of gasps rang out. All the Heavenly Tao ferocious beasts and the remnant citizens trembled violently. Their expressions changed drastically as they cried out involuntarily. The master of the magic hall, Yi Xian? How could it be him? What happened? This is the primordial lightning tribulation. How could it be related to the master of the magic hall, Yi Xian? Look at his cultivation. He's still at the peak of the 9th level of the Heavenly Tao realm. This is how it should be. Could it be that you think he can break through and step into the primordial Tao realm after the Heavenly Tao realm? That's ridiculous. It seems that this is indeed the primordial pill tribulation. It's not the real primordial lightning tribulation, but the sign of the birth of a treasure pill. Hiss. The primordial treasure pill. It must be the primordial treasure pill. I've heard that the master of the magic hall, Yi Xian, has already refined the Heavenly Tao treasure pill and is preparing to refine the primordial treasure pill. It seems that it's true. Back then, the 9 Heavenly Tao treasure liquid that Senior Hong Kei refined did not trigger the primordial pill tribulation. Just this point alone shows that there's a problem. The master of the magic hall, Yi Xian, is simply heaven-defying. Since the primordial pill tribulation has descended, the effects of the primordial treasure pill that he refined are obviously stronger than the legendary 9 Heavenly Tao treasure liquid. Damn it, the forbidden area that I'm in seems to have offended him. If I had known that this would happen, I would have regretted it. I'm afraid I'm going to miss a huge opportunity. Whoosh! Fellow Taoists, how have you been? Along with the earth-shattering exclamations, Yi Xian, who had successfully withstood the invisible primordial pill tribulation, rushed over at this moment. His face was flushed, as if he had been slightly injured by the primordial pill tribulation just now, however. His expression was rather excited, and a look of joy appeared on his face. He looked around at the thousands of Heavenly Dao's old monsters who were gathered in the void. Then he cupped his fists and said, "I'm ashamed. Originally, I was only comprehending the secret method to refine the 9 Heavenly Dao treasure liquid here. I didn't expect that just as I comprehended it, I would trigger the primordial pill tribulation. I unintentionally alarmed everyone. I really didn't mean to. Please don't blame me." As soon as he said this, the surroundings instantly fell silent. The group of Heavenly Dao's old monsters were caught off guard. They were all stunned for a moment, and then they reacted. Their expressions changed abruptly, and they cried out in surprise again. "The 9 Heavenly Dao treasure liquid? What's going on? Where did the master of the magic hall, Yi Xian, obtain the secret method to refine the 9 Heavenly Dao treasure liquid? And he even comprehended it thoroughly. How is this possible? It must be an excuse, right? He must have already refined some kind of heaven-shaking primordial treasure medicine. He was afraid that it would be too shocking, so he used the 9 Heavenly Dao treasure liquid as an excuse. Although it's a good excuse, it seems to be a bit too childish. Even the Chaos Starfield doesn't have the secret method to refine the 9 Heavenly Dao treasure liquid. How could it fall into his hands? Fellow Taoist Yi, aren't you being a bit unkind? The primordial treasure medicine is no small matter. Since fellow Taoist has refined it, you should share it with everyone. We are willing to pay any price, as long as we can take a look at the primordial treasure medicine. Roar! In an instant, the void became noisy again. All the old monsters of the Heavenly Dao were excited, and they were certain that Yi Xian must have refined the legendary primordial treasure medicine. At this moment, the gazes that converged on him were all filled with a burning desire that couldn't be dispersed. At this moment, Yi Xian could be said to be extremely popular and admired by all. Only Hong Tao, the leader of the Chaos K Starfield, was taken aback by his words, but he soon furrowed his brows. In his opinion, Yi Xian's words were most likely true. He had just obtained the secret method to refine the 9 Heavenly Dao treasure liquid from the Chaos Starfield not long ago. Calculating the time, it should be just right for him to completely comprehend it. As for the so-called primordial treasure medicine, not to mention that this matter was not confirmed, even if Yi Xian really had the ability and method to refine such a supreme treasure medicine, there was simply not enough time. No. Although he was more or less certain of this point, he still had other doubts in his heart. This was because even when ancestor Hong Ke refined the 9 Heavenly Dao treasure liquid a million years ago, he had never attracted the primordial pill tribulation. But now, Yi Xian had only thoroughly comprehended the secret method to refine the Heavenly 9 Great Dao treasure liquid that ancestor Hong Ke had left behind. He hadn't even truly opened the furnace to refine it, so how could he possibly cause the primordial pill tribulation to descend? There was something strange about this matter, and there were definitely other secrets behind it. However, Hong Tao was unable to figure it out no matter how hard he racked his brains. He was simply unable to figure out what exactly the trick was. The 9 Heavenly Dao treasure liquid is no small matter. How could I joke about such a thing? Seeing that the Heavenly Dao old monsters in the surrounding void did not believe him at all, Yi Xian sneered inwardly. However, he did not show it on his face at all, and his face was still full of smiles. As he spoke, he glanced at Hong Tao and pointed at him from 100 billion miles away in the void. Then he continued, "What's more, fellow Taoist Hong Tao from the Chaos Starfield is right here. What I said just now is true. Fellow Taoists, why don't you ask fellow Taoist Hong Tao and you'll know immediately." This was the truth. When it came to the 9 Heavenly Dao treasure liquid, there was indeed no one else in the entire left bank of the Milky Way other than Hong Tao, who was in charge of the Chaos Starfield. These thoughts flashed through their minds. After being reminded by Yi Xian, the more than 1,000 Heavenly Dao ferocious beasts and old monsters in the surrounding void were suddenly stunned. Then, they turned at the same time and gathered their gazes on Hong Tao. Ahem. Yi Daoyi is right. The secret method to refine the 9 Heavenly Dao treasure liquid left behind by ancestor Hong Ke is indeed in his hands now. Hong Tao coughed twice and cleared his throat. He turned to look at everyone and paused for a moment before continuing. Nearly a month ago, fellow Taoist Yi came to my Chaos Starfield and entered the parallel void where ancestor Hong Ke was in seclusion. By chance, the secret method manuscript of the 9 heavenly Tao treasure liquid left behind by ancestor Hong Kei was obtained by fellow Taoist Yi, as well as the red lotus karmic fire that was necessary to refine the 9 heavenly Tao treasure liquid. After that, fellow Taoist Yi bid farewell to this old man and left, saying that she wanted to find a place to comprehend the ancestor's manuscript. Counting the time, almost a month has passed now, so it should be just enough time for her to completely comprehend the secret technique manuscript left behind by the ancestor. With him personally confirming it, there was naturally no longer any doubt in this matter. The 1,000 or so old monsters of heavenly Tao who had gathered in the area were caught off guard. They were all dumbfounded on the spot, but they soon registered what had happened. Their expressions changed, and they cried out in surprise. Hong Tao was the person in charge of the Chaos Starfield. With his confirmation, there was naturally no doubt. Moreover, in the past million years, there were actually many heavenly Tao old monsters on the left bank who went to the Chaos Starfield because of its fame. They wanted to try to enter the parallel void connected to the Chaos Starfield. Among them, there was even an old monster of the 8th stage of the heavenly Tao who was skilled in the art of controlling fire. Due to his overconfidence, he unfortunately lost his life to the terrifying might of the red lotus karmic fire after entering the parallel void. However, therefore, not only did all the heavenly Tao old monsters present know about this matter, but some of them had even been to the Chaos Starfield and observed it from afar outside the Chaos Starfield. Because of that, when they heard Hong Tao's words, the 1,000 or so old monsters of heavenly Tao who were gathered in the area were caught off guard. They were instantly dumbfounded, but they soon reacted. Their expressions changed, and they cried out in surprise once again. This is too surprising. It's actually the 9 heavenly Tao elixir. Counting the time, the 9 heavenly Tao elixir has been lost on the left bank for millions of years. I didn't expect it to reappear today. It's really something worth celebrating. The master of the magic hall is indeed extraordinary. After all, he is in existence who possesses the Shenong 9 colored flames. He can even refine the red lotus karmic fire. I've heard that the refinement of the 9 heavenly Tao elixir requires such a terrifying top-grade heavenly flame. Since the red lotus karmic fire was refined by the master of the magic hall, it's only natural that the refinement method of the 9 heavenly Tao elixir was passed down to him. However, even the 9 heavenly Tao elixir did not attract the primordial pill tribulation back then. Now the master of the magic hall, Yi Xian, has not even opened the furnace to refine it. He has only thoroughly studied the refinement method of the 9 heavenly Tao elixir, and he has already attracted the primordial pill tribulation. This is definitely not normal. It seems that he has some kind of enlightenment and accidentally saw through some kind of shocking secret. If that's really the case, doesn't that mean that the effects of the 9 heavenly Tao elixir refined by the master of the magic hall, Yi Xian, will be even more shocking, surpassing the effects of ancestor Hong Kei back then? This is very likely, and it's most likely the truth. The 9 heavenly Tao elixir refined by ancestor Hong Kei back then was already incredible. If the master of the magic hall has a new discovery, the significance of the 9 heavenly Tao elixir refined is simply immeasurable. This is the rhythm of piercing through the sky. As these words rang out, even the eyelids of Hong Tao, who came from the Hong Kei starfield, twitched wildly. He also had a similar guess in his heart, and this was indeed the only explanation for the scene in front of him. Thinking of this, his heartstrings suddenly tightened. With a flash of light in his eyes, he immediately looked at Yi Xian. An anxious expression appeared on his face as he impatiently asked, "Congratulations, fellow Taoist Yi. You've finally successfully comprehended the secret refining method of the 9 heavenly Tao elixir left behind by ancestor Hong Quebec. It's even very likely that you've made a new breakthrough." Halfway through, he suddenly changed the topic, and the flesh on his face twitched a few times. "I believe fellow Taoist should still remember the agreement you made with this old man nearly a month ago. I wonder if it's convenient for you to." Fellow Taoist Hong also saw that this hall just endured the power of the primordial pill tribulation. Without waiting for him to finish speaking, Yi Xian immediately waved his hand and interrupted him. Although the primordial pill tribulation is not as powerful as the primordial lightning tribulation, it is definitely not something the heavenly Tao lightning tribulation can compare to. After all, it contains a trace of primordial qi. Even if it was only a single bolt of tribulation lightning, this hall was almost unable to withstand it. Now, I'm already injured. Nearly a month ago, this hall did promise fellow Taoist Hong to refine 3 batches of the 9 heavenly Tao elixir for your fellow Taoists in Hong Kei Starfield. Although this hall has thoroughly comprehended the secret refining method of the 9 heavenly Tao elixir, due to my injuries, it's not the best time to refine it. Hearing this, Hong Tao's expression suddenly changed. His heart, which was already taut, trembled as a bad feeling surfaced in his heart. He was originally worried that Yi Xian would refuse, but now it seemed that this was really the case. This was not good news. To him, the 3 batches of the 9 heavenly Tao elixir that were already set in stone were tantamount to endless variables in an instant. However, just as he was about to try to persuade Yi Xian with a displeased expression, Yi Xian suddenly changed the topic halfway through his words. With a wave of his hand, he continued, "Fellow Taoist Hong, there's no need to frown, and there's no need to be nervous. This hall hasn't finished speaking yet. Don't think too much. This hall has always been a man of integrity. Since we agreed that after thoroughly comprehending the secret refining method of the 9 heavenly Tao elixir, I will immediately help you refine the 3 batches of the 9 heavenly Tao elixir when I come out of seclusion, there is absolutely no possibility of breaking this agreement. Isn't it just a little injury? If it's only 3 batches, I can barely hold on. This hall will immediately open the furnace and refine it for fellow Taoist. It just so happens that the fellow Taoists of the left bank present can also be witnesses. Are you serious?" Just a moment ago, he was still worried about this matter, but he didn't expect Yi Xian to suddenly change the topic. The pleasant surprise came so quickly that even Hong Tao was caught off guard. His eyes burst out with a blazing light of surprise, and he subconsciously exclaimed softly. After that, he realized that his attitude was a little too impatient, and it seemed that he was a little too unsightly. His face suddenly felt awkward, and he rubbed his hands and smiled repeatedly, pretending to be polite. "Actually, fellow Taoist, you doesn't have to be so anxious. How can this old man not trust fellow Taoist's credibility? If you are really injured, in this old man's opinion, fellow Taoist, you should first go into seclusion to recover from your injuries, and then refine the 9 heavenly Tao elixir. If that's the case, this hall is afraid that fellow Taoist Hong won't be able to sleep and eat in peace." Yi Xian sneered in his heart, but his face was still smiling. He nodded and said, "Don't forget that this hall withstood a primordial pill tribulation just now. Although it didn't cause any serious injuries, it was definitely not ordinary. If you really want to go into seclusion to recover and fully recover from your injuries, I'm afraid you won't be able to come out of seclusion for at least a year or so. Can fellow Taoist Hong's 3 batches of the 9 heavenly Tao elixir really wait that long?" Hong Tao was dumbfounded on the spot. He opened his mouth, but the fake polite words he wanted to say later couldn't be said in an instant. Hearing the conversation between the two of them, the thousands of heavenly Tao ferocious beasts and the old monsters in the right part of the void naturally understood what had happened. After recovering from the shock, the group of old fellows trembled slightly. They gasped and immediately exclaimed out loud, "Ha ha ha! Ha ha ha! Ha ha ha! Ha ha ha! What? Fellow Taoist, ye is going to start refining the 9 heavenly Tao elixir now? 3 batches of it. The Chaos Lax star field is really generous. It's simply enviable. 3 batches of the 9 heavenly Tao elixir, that's more than 200 bottles. It's enough for 5 or 6 peak heavenly Tao elixirs to use, but unfortunately, I don't have a share. It's simply a pity. How can I be willing? Roar. I don't agree with this matter. Why does the Chaos Lax star field have to refine 3 batches of it at once? I also have the heavenly Tao elixir, and I'm willing to pay half as a reward to ask fellow Taoist Yi to refine it. Of the 3 batches of it today, I must take 1. 3 batches of the 9 heavenly Tao elixir, that's more than 200 bottles. It's enough for 5 or 6 peak heavenly Tao elixirs to use, but unfortunately, I don't have a share. It's simply a pity. How can I be willing? Roar. I don't agree with this matter. Why does the Chaos Lax star field have to refine 3 batches of it at once? I also have the heavenly Tao elixir, and I'm willing to pay half as a reward to ask fellow Taoist Yi to refine it. Of the 3 batches of it today, I must take 1. What a joke. Fellow Taoist Yi has only refined 3 batches of it today. Even if the Chaos Lax star field has given you 2 batches, why should you monopolize 1? That's right, you're talking as if I don't have the heavenly Tao elixir, or perhaps you think I'm not your opponent? Hiss. This matter concerns the 9 heavenly treasures elixir, so whoever wants to monopolize it will have to ask me first. As Yi Xian declared that he would refine 3 batches of the 9 heavenly treasures elixir today, the thousands of heavenly Tao ferocious beasts and old monsters standing in the void immediately began to argue. So the atmosphere in the air became tense, as if a dispute would descend at any moment. Hong Tao frowned, his face heavy with worry. Although the Chaos Lax starfield was ranked 10th among the remnant starfields on the left bank, and even his personal strength was ranked in the top 10 among the remnant starfields on the left bank, there were thousands of Heavenly Dao ferocious beasts here. Now, there were more than 1,000 old monsters of the Heavenly Dao gathered here. Besides the survivors of the primordial era, there were also the ferocious beasts of the stars. If they were enraged, he and the Chaos Lax starfield would not be able to withstand it. These old fellows were all Heavenly Dao ferocious beasts, and they would do anything for the 9 Heavenly Treasures elixir. After all, on both sides of the Milky Way, the 9 Heavenly Treasures elixir was the only hope to break through to the primordial Dao realm. Moreover, this hope had been lost millions of years ago. Now that it had suddenly reappeared, one could imagine how shocking and attractive it was. As these thoughts flashed through Hong Tao's mind, he subconsciously turned to look at Yi Xian. At this moment, he suddenly felt a little regretful. If he had known this would happen, he would not have been so anxious to ask Yi Xian about the 3 batches of the 9 Heavenly Treasures elixir in front of everyone. Back he could have waited for the crowd to disperse before asking in private. How could there be such trouble now? Fellow Taoists, there is no need to argue about this. Just as Hong Tao was feeling gloomy, Yi Xian spoke again. He turned to look at the thousands of heavenly beasts of the 9 Heavenly Treasures elixir in the Chaos Lax starfield. His voice paused for a moment before he continued. The 3 batches of 9 Heavenly Treasures elixir in the Chaos Lax starfield are things that I have promised you about a month ago. I cannot delay it for long, so I must fulfill my promise today. As for your request, I am indeed injured today. After I finish refining the 3 batches of 9 Heavenly Treasures elixir, if I still have energy left, I will try my best to help you refine 2 more batches. Of course, there are only 2 batches. There are too many monks and too little gruel. However, fellow Hong has already prepared for this. You can just ask him later. At this point, Yi Xian did not say anything else. He turned to look at Hong Tao and said, Fellow Hong, we will talk about the rest later. I have already said that I will help you refine the 3 batches of 9 Heavenly Treasures elixir today. Now, you can take out the ingredients. When they heard Yi Xian's words, the expressions of the 1,000 or so Heavenly Dao's old monsters in the air softened a little. Even though Yi Xian did not say it explicitly, they understood what he meant. He had clearly expressed that although he had only refined a few furnaces today, he could continue to refine the Heavenly 9 Treasures liquid for the various Heavenly Dao old monsters in the future. As for this matter, Yi Xian would not interfere and leave everything to Hong Tao to handle. This was within expectations, so no one was surprised. After all, in order to obtain more 9 Heavenly Dao elixir of the 9 Heavenly Dao, even Patriarch Hong Ke had publicly refined 9 Heavenly Dao elixir for the Heavenly Dao experts of the left bank. Only just by refining it, one could receive half of the treasured liquid as a reward. As long as one had the ability, anyone would be willing to do such a thing. When these thoughts flashed through their minds, the 1,000 or so old monsters of Heavenly Dao who had gathered in the air around them instantly relaxed. They stopped arguing. On the other hand, Hong Tao's heart relaxed. He smiled as he looked at Yi Xian with gratitude. Yi Xian's words just now seemed to be light and did not say anything explicitly, but they reminded the Heavenly Dao's old monsters who had gathered in the surroundings. It made them realize that the reason why Yi Xian could obtain the secret method to refine the 9 Heavenly Dao elixir of the 9 Heavenly Dao elixir was because of Hong Ke Galaxy. Therefore, in the future, even if he wanted to help others refine the 9 Heavenly Dao elixir, this matter would be spread through Hong Ke Galaxy. Under such circumstances, naturally, no one would dare to offend Hong Tao. Otherwise, they would be going against themselves. When they returned, they would think of ways to avoid it or try to push it back as much as possible. When that happened, they would really have a headache. In reality, even now, Hong Tao had already seen some differences in the gazes of the Heavenly Dao experts who had gathered in the surroundings. This made him extremely satisfied. He secretly praised the master of the magic hall, Yi Xian, in his heart. He had unknowingly helped him resolve the crisis. He was really too kind, Xiao. With that thought in mind, he no longer hesitated. With a wave of his hand, there was a faint sound of something tearing through the air. A ray of light was sent out by him. In the blink of an eye, it arrived in front of Yi Xian and turned into a storage artifact. Yi Xian had promised him a total of 3 cauldrons of the 9 Heavenly Great Dao elixir. Refining 3 cauldrons of 9 Heavenly Great Dao elixir required a total of 27 portions of Heavenly Dao elixir. Of course, this could be repeated, because each cauldron only required 9 portions of Heavenly Tao elixir. As long as the 9 types of Heavenly Tao elixir were not the same, there would be no problem at all. And now, this storage magic treasure that Hong Tao had sent over with a wave of his hand just so happened to contain 27 portions of Heavenly Tao essence liquid. Of course, there were also various other supplementary materials, and all of them were top-grade items. These 27 portions of origin liquid were not all different. There were some that were similar, but there were a total of 17 to 18 types. This is among them. There were 7 or 8 that were not present in the 40-plus portions of origin liquid in Yi Xian's possession. Although Xian had more than 40 portions of origin liquid in his possession, there were only slightly more than 20 types. Among them, 15 to 16 portions were similar. These 15 to 16 portions were of no use to him and had to be replaced. Because refining a level 31 primordial chaos pellet required 81 different types of origin liquid in the cauldron. Now, among the 27 portions of origin liquid that Hong Tao had taken out, there were 7 or 8 types that were not present in Yi Xian's possession. He could completely replace these 7 or 8 types of origin liquid without anyone noticing before he started the refining process. In this way, the remaining items that were similar to each other were reduced by half, leaving only 7 or 8 types. And this was also the reason why Yi Xian was anxious to fulfill his promise and help Hong Tao refine these 3 cauldrons of 9 Heavenly Great Tao elixir on the spot. After all, the Heavenly Tao essence liquid was really hard to find. To be able to replace half of the 15 to 16 portions of similar items in the blink of an eye was definitely not a small matter to him. After Yi Xian put away the storage magic treasure, all of this was done silently in the short span of a breath. After that, Yi Xian suddenly waved his hand, and in an instant, a ray of light shot out from his body. Chapter 5138. Whoosh! After silently exchanging half of the dozen or so identical items in his hands, Yi Xian's heart relaxed and he instantly waved his hand. A sharp sound broke through the air, and a ray of light shot out. In the blink of an eye, it turned into the farmer god's treasured cauldron. It was huge and spanned across the void. At the mouth of the cauldron, a 9-colored mist was dense like a spring, dazzling everyone. For in the surrounding void, there were gasps. Although the more than 1,000 heavenly beasts and old monsters gathered here had long heard of the fierce name of the master of the magic hall, Yi Xian, they knew that he had the farmer god's treasured cauldron in his hands. It was a primordial treasure of an era in a large world. It contained the farmer god's 9-colored flame, a top-grade heavenly flame however, except for a few existences, the rest had only heard of it and had never seen it with their own eyes. Before this, many of the heavenly beasts present had never really met Yi Xian. Now that they suddenly saw him take out the farmer god's treasured cauldron, it was normal for them to have such a reaction when they were caught off guard. In fact, among these heavenly beasts, there was a flash of greed in the depths of some of their eyes. It was obvious that they were greedy, but that was all. Yi Xian's fierce name was well known on the left bank and the right bank. They dared to think about it, but it might not be realistic to actually make a move. Moreover, Yi Xian was related to the 9 Heavenly Great Tao elixir. His identity was too sensitive. Who would have the guts to suddenly make a move on him in public? Yi Xian didn't pay any attention to all of this. As the treasured cauldron was taken out, his shoulders shook, and his entire body instantly transformed into a ray of light that shot out. In the blink of an eye, he arrived at the entrance of the cauldron that was filled with 9-colored fog. He directly sat down cross-legged and closed his eyes. Although the 9 Heavenly Great Tao elixir was far inferior to the level 31 primordial pill, it was the only supreme elixir on both sides of the Milky Way that was helpful in breaking through to the primordial Tao realm. It was naturally not easy to refine it. Even if Yi Xian were to make a move, with his attainments and experience in the Tao of medicine, it would still take him several days to refine it. Moreover, he couldn't be distracted in the slightest during this process. He had to devote all of his attention to it. In this situation where there were more than 1,000 heavenly beasts around, Yi Xian naturally would not put himself in danger. Now that he had entered the mouth of the farmer god's cauldron, the cauldron filled with 9-colored mist. The refinement of the 9 Great Tao treasure liquid was completely carried out within the central region volcano within the cauldron. This was because the refinement of the treasure liquid required the use of the Red Lotus karmic fire, and after the Red Lotus karmic fire was refined, it had long since been stored by Yi Xian in the 9-colored flame pool at the bottom of the central region volcano. At this moment, following Yi Xian's thought, an earth-shattering rumble sounded out from the 9-colored flame pool at the bottom of the central region volcano. The boundless red lotus karmic fire directly soared into the sky and floated in midair at the center of the central region volcano. In the blink of an eye, it turned into 3 cauldrons formed purely by the red lotus hellfire. 3. The flame energy cauldrons were lined up in a row. Countless red lotuses were blooming inside and outside. They were extremely beautiful, but they were emitting a terrifying pressure that made one's heart palpitate. Although Yi Xian had forcefully withstood the primordial pill tribulation, in reality, he had already secretly swallowed some primal chaos medicine. His injuries had long since recovered, and he wasn't injured as he had said. If he were to refine the 9 heavenly great Tao elixir now, not to mention 3 cauldrons, even 300 cauldrons would not be a problem. This could be seen from the fact that the 3 cauldrons were being refined at the same time. Dang. However, only he knew about this. Everything in the cauldron was not visible to the 1,000 heavenly beasts gathered in the void outside. They could not detect anything. Whoosh! Whoosh whoosh whoosh. Soon, there was a faint sound of breaking through the air from the center of the volcano. A total of 27 portions of the heavenly great Tao elixir were divided into 3 batches. Each batch had 9 portions, and they shot out into the 3 flame energy cauldrons that were lined up in midair. At the same time, the other auxiliary materials for refining the 9 heavenly great Tao elixir also shot out. They were all thrown into the cauldron by Yi Xian. Then, he began the refinement. Heavens! The 9 heavenly great Tao elixir was indeed extraordinary, but Yi Xian's talent in the Tao of alchemy was also not to be underestimated. Even if he refined 3 cauldrons at the same time, with his current terrifying divine sense, it was still easy for him. However, none of this was known to outsiders. In their eyes, Yi Xian entered the mouth of the Shenong cauldron that was filled with 9-colored mist. After sitting down cross-legged, he closed his eyes. His expression was extremely solemn, as if it was quite strenuous for him. Time slowly passed. According to Yi Xian's estimation, refining the same cauldron of treasures at the same time would take at most 4 days to complete. This matter, in fact, it was indeed so. When the 4th day was about to pass, the 3 flame energy cauldrons hanging in midair above the volcano exploded at the same time. The cauldrons once again turned into a sea of red karmic fire, gathered together, and directly fell into the 9-colored flame pool at the bottom of the volcano. While what was left in the void were 3 cauldrons of treasures. Each cauldron was divided into 81 small cauldrons. Each small cauldron of the 9 heavenly great Tao elixir was only the size of a nascent soul's fist, but the energy aura it emitted was extremely shocking. It clearly contained a trace of weak primordial power. When this scene fell into the eyes of the rhinoceros beetle, the old man's expression changed instantly. His body trembled violently as he gasped in shock. Hiss! 9 heavenly great Tao elixir? Big brother, you are really a big shot. You actually made 3 cauldrons and more than 200 bottles. Previously, when Yi Xian waved his hand and summoned the Shenong cauldron, this old man had already sensed it. He walked out of the distant mountain range in the cauldron space and went to a place not far from the volcano in the central region to watch from afar. He did not understand what Yi Xian was going to do today, but at this moment, he suddenly understood. The 9 heavenly great Tao elixir had been lost on the left bank for millions of years. Even the goat horn immortal had only heard of it. Such as now that he suddenly saw this kind of supreme treasure elixir appear again, and 3 cauldrons and more than 200 bottles appeared at once. The shock in his heart was intense, which could be seen from this. But Yi Xian did not pay attention to him at all, because even Yi Xian did not have a share of these 3 cauldrons of treasure elixir, let alone the goat horn immortal. Although the treasure elixir was refined, Yi Xian did not get up. His figure was still sitting cross-legged at the mouth of the cauldron that was filled with 9-colored fog. His eyes were closed tightly, and his expression was solemn. It seemed that he was still trying to refine the treasure elixir. Again, after sitting for 4 or 5 days, he estimated that the time was almost up. Then he suddenly opened his eyes, and the corners of his mouth outlined a relieved smile. Whoosh! With a thought, the 3 cauldrons of 9 heavenly great Tao elixir that had been refined long ago gathered together in an instant, transforming into a ray of light that rushed out from the belly of the volcano in the central region. It directly rushed toward the mouth of the cauldron that Yi Xian was sitting cross-legged. With a thought from Yi Xian, the 3 cauldrons of 9 heavenly great Tao elixir that had been refined long ago gathered together in an instant, transforming into a ray of light that rushed out from the belly of the volcano in the central region. It directly rushed toward the mouth of the cauldron that Yi Xian was sitting cross-legged. Whoosh! Whoosh whoosh whoosh. After rushing out of the cauldron, the 3 cauldrons of 9 heavenly great Tao elixir were immediately stored in small bottles by Yi Xian. Hong Tao had long since been prepared for this. Among the storage magic treasure that he gave to Yi Xian with a wave of his hand, there were 243 small bottles that were used to store the refined heavenly 9 great Tao treasure elixir. This scene unfolded at the mouth of the cauldron. More than 1,000 heavenly law ferocious beasts and experts gathered in the distance saw it with their own eyes. In an instant, along with a large number of gasps, soft cries that were like a tide came from all over the place. Look, the refining of the 3 cauldrons of 9 heavenly great Tao elixir has been completed. Hiss! So many 9 heavenly great Tao elixir. The aura is rich, and each small bottle contains a wisp of primordial energy. It is definitely the legendary 9 heavenly great Tao elixir. 3 full cauldrons, more than 200 bottles, almost blinding this old man's eyes. It's too amazing. 9 heavenly great Tao elixir. It really is the 9 heavenly great Tao elixir. It has been lost on the left bank for millions of years, and now it has finally reappeared. This is really a blessing for the people of the left bank. From now on, the 9 heavenly great Tao elixir has reappeared on the left bank. Although this is indeed a blessing, don't forget that the main material needed to refine this kind of elixir is the heavenly great Tao elixir. Even millions of years ago, the 9 heavenly great Tao elixir had once caused a bloody storm on both sides of the Milky Way. This time, I'm afraid. Who cares about that? For the 9 heavenly great Tao elixir. So what if we hunt down the incarnations of the will of the heavenly great Tao? In this world, the strong are respected. If you don't have the original body to protect you, why can't you help others? Roar. Hiss hiss hiss. When they were excited, some powerful space beasts instantly raised their heads and let out shocking roars and howls. All of them revealed boundless excitement, and an iron-blooded killing aura instantly filled the void. Obviously, they were a little impatient. Refining the 9 heavenly Tao elixir required 9 different types of heavenly Tao origin elixir as the main material. Although there were over 1,000 heavenly Tao ferocious beasts and survivors present, not all of them had more than 9 different types of 9 heavenly Tao elixir in their hands. Therefore, if nothing unexpected happened, many of the existences present would probably immediately start hunting after they dispersed today. It was not only those existences who were once incarnations of the heavenly great Tao of a large world that had to be vigilant, but the other heavenly great Tao experts were also the same. Because, even if they were not incarnations of the heavenly great Tao of a large world, since they were heavenly great Tao experts, it was possible for them to collect heavenly great Tao elixir. Killing others to seize their treasures was simply too common in the vast starry sky. It was precisely because they realized this point that the expressions of the 1,000 over heavenly great Tao experts that were gathered in all directions instantly turned cold, and the atmosphere in the void imperceptibly became heavy and oppressive. This Yi Xian was well aware of all this, but he did not care. The more chaotic the situation was, the more advantageous it was for him. In this way, he could take advantage of the situation to fish in troubled waters and silently make a fortune. Soon, the 243 bottles of 9 heavenly great Tao elixir were filled up, and all the small bottles were kept in the storage magic treasure by Yi Xian. Then, with a wave of his hand, he directly sent it to Hong Tao in the distance. At this moment, the eyes of more than 1,000 heavenly great Tao beasts and heavenly great Tao experts all gathered on this storage magic treasure that was shooting toward Hong Tao, revealing endless greed. Even more, some people's breathing was rapid, and their chests were violently rising and falling. The 9 heavenly great Tao elixir was currently the only supreme elixir on both sides of the Milky Way that was helpful for breaking through to the primordial Tao realm, and it had been lost for millions of years. Now, there were more than 240 bottles in this storage magic treasure, and its weight could be seen at a glance. Look, seeing this storage magic treasure shooting toward Hong Tao, a strong intention to snatch it surged in the hearts of some people, but this impulse was forcefully suppressed by them in the end. Because there were more than 1,000 heavenly great Tao old monsters present. No matter who made a move, it was absolutely impossible for them to escape smoothly. Instead, they would die because of this. Namely, he escaped with his life, but from now on, he had offended Hong Tao and the master of the magic hall, Yi Xian. It was absolutely impossible to ask them to refine the 9 heavenly great Tao elixir again. At this moment, the atmosphere in the void was heavy to the extreme, and Hong Tao was even more nervous. His heartstrings were tight, and his heart was in his throat. He was really afraid that something would happen at this last juncture, but in the end, everything was calm, and the storage magic treasure that shot out smoothly fell into his hands. Ha ha ha, Fellow Yi is really trustworthy. With a flip of his hand, this storage magic treasure that contained 243 bottles of 9 heavenly great Dao elixir was stored in Hong Tao's body. At this moment, his heart that had been hanging in his throat completely fell back, and a look of joy appeared on his face. He raised his head and laughed loudly, first praising and complimenting Yi Xian. Then he changed the topic and asked, "All right, other than the 3 batches of 9 heavenly great Dao elixir that you promised this old man that day, Yi Xian also said that you want to see how your own condition is after refining it before deciding whether to help the other fellow Taoists refine 2 batches. I wonder how fellow Ye's injuries are now that you've finished refining these 3 batches? If you don't have enough strength, you can delay this matter a little. Don't try to be brave. It's better to focus on your own precious body." These words sounded nice. On the surface, it seemed like he was concerned about Yi Xian, but in fact, he was clearly urging him. Yi Wenxian heard this. He immediately sneered in his heart. This old man was really not a good person. He was simply burning the bridge after crossing the river. He had just refined 3 batches of 9 heavenly great Dao elixir for him, and now he was being schemed against. He deliberately mentioned this matter. On one hand, it was to express goodwill to the thousands of heavenly Dao old monsters gathered around. On the other hand, it was clearly to divert everyone's attention. After all, if Yi Xian refined 2 more batches of 9 heavenly great Dao elixir, he wouldn't be the only one with the 9 heavenly great Dao elixir. The risk of snatching it from him was too great. If he didn't succeed, he would offend others. Therefore, even if someone really wanted to rob him, they would definitely choose the other 2 batches of 9 heavenly great Dao elixir. However, all of this had nothing to do with Yi Xian. It had nothing to do with him who he robbed. However, this old man clearly knew that Yi Xian was injured, and he had just helped him refine 3 batches of 9 heavenly great Dao elixir. In order to divert everyone's covetous thoughts, he actually ignored this point. To put it bluntly, he was no different from an ingrate. These thoughts flashed through Yi Xian's mind, and a cold light flashed through his eyes. "You're heartless. I'm not righteous. You'll suffer later." But on the surface, he didn't show it. Instead, he nodded with a smile and promised, "Fellow Hong, you don't have to worry. It's not a problem to refine 2 more furnaces. Since I've already agreed, I naturally can't decline. These 2 furnaces. I'll refine them." There were more than 1,000 heavenly Dao ferocious beasts and remnant old monsters present, but there were only 2 cauldrons of heavenly 9 great Dao elixir that Yi Xian was about to refine. This is obviously, it was not enough to share. No matter who the quota for these 2 furnaces was given to, the others would not agree. Regarding this matter, when Yi Xian was refining the first 3 cauldrons of the 9 heavenly great Dao elixir, Hong Tao had already discussed it with the over 1,000 heavenly law ferocious beasts and old monsters gathered in the surrounding void. The ferocious beasts and the survivors would each get 1 furnace. But however, it was still not for any one person. It was for fusion. As for the ferocious beasts, the 9 heavenly law ferocious beasts of the right segment each took out a portion of heavenly law origin liquid and fused it into a cauldron of heavenly 9 great Dao treasure liquid. After the refinement was completed, there were 81 bottles of heavenly 9 treasures liquid that came out of the cauldron. These 9 ferocious beasts who had each provided a portion of the heavenly law origin liquid were equally distributed, each with 9 bottles. Until it was the same for Yu Yimin's cauldron. The 9 heavenly Dao survivors who were famous in the right segment each took out a portion of the heavenly law origin liquid and fused it. This was naturally the best distribution plan. Even if there were still people who were unwilling, the 9 heavenly law ferocious beasts and 9 heavenly Dao survivors chosen by Hong Tao were all famous people in the right segment. Whoever objected would be going against them, and at the same time, they would also offend Yi Xian and Hong Tao, so that kind of situation would not happen again. Even if there were people who were unhappy, they could only accept it. In fact, when Yi Xian was refining the first 3 cauldrons, Hong Tao had not only confirmed the refining plan with the heavenly Dao old monsters in the surrounding void, but he had also already collected the portions of heavenly law origin liquid that the 18 ferocious beasts and survivors had each taken out. 2 cauldrons, a total of 18 portions of heavenly law origin liquid and other supplementary materials, were now in Hong Tao's hands and placed in another storage magic treasure. Fellow Taoists, although fellow Taoist Yi has agreed to refine the cauldron, this old man has to make one thing clear in advance. Seeing Yi Xian nod in agreement, Hong Tao nodded and then turned to look at the 18 heavenly law ferocious beasts and survivors. With a solemn expression he continued, "The 9 heavenly Dao treasured liquid was created by the ancestor of my Hong K star field, Hong Quebec. 1,000,000 years ago, it was a custom on the left bank that anyone who provided the heavenly law origin liquid and other supplementary materials to ask ancestor Hong Kei to refine the 9 heavenly treasured liquid would receive half of the treasured liquid as a reward, which is 40 bottles. Now, after 1,000,000 years, the 9 heavenly treasured liquid has reappeared on the left bank, but the rule from back then cannot be broken. Otherwise, I'm sure fellow Taoist Yi will be disinterested. After all, he has no obligation to do so. Therefore, in the future, if someone asks fellow Taoist Yi to refine the 9 heavenly treasured liquid, the reward will still be the same as back then, 40 bottles per cauldron. As for today, because these 2 cauldrons are refined by 9 fellow Taoists, in order to make it easier to distribute, this old man means that fellow Taoist Yi will only receive 36 bottles per cauldron. In this way, after deducting fellow Taoist Yi's reward, there will be 45 bottles left for each of the 9 fellow Taoists, which is exactly 5 bottles per person. Everything had been arranged for Yi Xian, but he did not explicitly say that the Hong Kei starfield would receive 50% of the reward. This was clearly to let Yi Xian attract hatred. He was truly a sly old fox. Now, regarding the reward for refining the 9 heavenly treasured liquid, even if he did not say it, everyone already knew, so now that there was no objection, Yi Xian naturally did not take the initiative to say anything else. A dark light flashed in his eyes, and he secretly sneered, immediately nodding in agreement. Whoosh! Seeing that Yi Xian nodded, the 1,000 or so heavenly Tao old monsters gathered in the void did not have any objections. Hong Kei was secretly delighted, and he did not hesitate any more. With a wave of his hand, the storage magic treasure containing the 2 cauldrons of materials instantly shot toward Yi Xian. In his hand, the storage magic treasure landed in the center of his palm, and Yi Xian's divine sense immediately extended into it. As soon as he investigated, he was immediately delighted. Although there were only 18 bottles of heavenly Tao origin liquid in the storage magic treasure, half of them were not in Yi Xian's hands, and Yi Xian only had 8 types of identical heavenly Tao origin liquid. Also, in other words, he could secretly change all the identical heavenly Tao origin liquids in his possession right now. This way, the total of 43 heavenly Tao origin liquids in his possession would all be different, and there would be no identical items. Refine. Refining a level 31 primordial pill required 81 different types of heavenly Tao origin liquid. As long as Yi Xian replaced the last 8 identical items, he would have more than half of the heavenly Tao origin liquid in his hands. This was naturally delightful. First, it was completed very quickly, and Yi Xian quietly replaced the last 8 identical heavenly Tao origin liquid in his hands. At this moment, he was in a good mood, because one of the main reasons why he was so busy today was to replace the identical heavenly Tao origin liquid in his hands. Now it was finally complete. Fellow Taoists, please wait a few more days. He let out a long breath, turned to the 18 heavenly Tao old monsters in the surrounding void, and nodded. After greeting them, he immediately closed his eyes and began the refinement of the 9 heavenly Tao origin liquid again. Boom! Rumble! In an instant, following Yi Xian's thought, an earth-shattering roar sounded from the 9-colored flame pool at the bottom of the volcano in the central region. The majestic red lotus karmic fire directly rushed into the sky and floated in mid-air at the center of the volcano in the central region. However, this time, it only split into 2 cauldrons formed purely by the red lotus karmic fire. They also lined up in mid-air at the center of the volcano in the central region. Whoosh! Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh! After the preparations were complete, a faint sound of air breaking immediately sounded. A total of 18 portions of heavenly Tao origin liquid were divided into 2 batches. Each batch of 9 portions shot out and landed in the 2 flame energy cauldrons that were lined up in mid-air at the center of the volcano. The other supplementary materials for refining the heavenly 9 treasures liquid were also thrown into the flame energy cauldrons by Yi Xian. The refinement of the 2 cauldrons of heavenly Tao origin liquid was completed in just 3 days. At this time, the 3 flame energy cauldrons that were suspended in mid-air above the volcano in the central region exploded at the same time. They turned into a red sea of karmic fire that gathered and fell directly into the 9-colored flame pool at the bottom of the volcano in the central region. While what was left in the void were 2 cauldrons of heavenly Tao origin liquid. Each cauldron was divided into 81 small cauldrons. Each small cauldron was only the size of a nascent soul fist. Yi Xian did not get up. He waited for another 3 or 4 days before suddenly opening his eyes. With a thought, the 2 cauldrons of heavenly 9 treasures liquid that had been completed instantly gathered together and turned into a ray of light that rushed out from the center of the volcano in the central region. Whoosh! Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh! The faint sound of air breaking rang out continuously. After the Heavenly Nine Treasures liquid rushed out of the cauldron, Yi Xian immediately waved his hand and directly divided them into bottles. He kept 72 bottles, and the remaining 90 bottles were stored in 2 storage Dharma treasures. He waved his hand and sent out. For the past few days, the 18 Heavenly Tao ferocious beasts and the old monsters who had each provided a portion of the Heavenly Tao origin liquid had been eagerly waiting. Now that the 2 cauldrons of Heavenly Nine Treasures liquid that belonged to them had finally been refined, the old fellows naturally did not have any hesitation. As soon as Yi Xian sent out the 2 storage Dharma treasures, the 18 Heavenly Tao old monsters split into 2 groups and divided the 90 bottles of Heavenly Nine Treasures liquid inside. 18 people, 5 bottles each. Although it was far from enough to let a peak Heavenly Tao at the 9th stage of perfection go into seclusion after swallowing it and successfully break through to the primordial Tao realm after the Heavenly Tao, that would require at least 40 bottles. However, this was the Heavenly Nine Treasures liquid after all. It had been lost on the left bank for millions of years. Now, even if there were only 5 bottles in hand, it was still something to be happy about. The 8 old monsters all laughed happily. After keeping the 5 bottles of Heavenly Nine Treasures liquid into their bodies, they immediately cupped their hands and thanked Yi Xian. They said that Yi Xian had received a total of 72 bottles from the 2 cauldrons, which made them feel a little pained. However, this kind of etiquette could not be lacking. In the future, they would still have to rely on Yi Xian to continue refining the treasure liquid for them. Yi, without saying anything, his figure flashed out from the mouth of the cauldron that was filled with 9-colored fog. Then, with a wave of his hand, he directly kept the cauldron into his body. Swish! Without hesitation, after keeping the cauldron, Yi Xian immediately waved his hand again, and a ray of light shot towards Hong Tao. In the blink of an eye, it arrived in front of him and stopped abruptly. It was a storage Dharma treasure. This storage magic treasure contained 36 bottles of Heavenly Nine Treasures liquid. It was a distribution plan that Yi Xian had discussed with Hong Tao back then. Half of all the rewards would be given to the Chaos Starfield. Although Yi Xian felt a little pained about this matter, he definitely couldn't be careless. This was because he had sworn a Tao Heart Oath, so he naturally wouldn't lose the big picture over a small matter. Dang! However, although Hong Tao had obtained 36 bottles of Heavenly Nine Treasures liquid for free this time, according to Yi Xian's plan, if nothing unexpected happened, such a thing would not happen again in the future. It was impossible for the old man to continue doing this kind of profitable business for a long time. Today, I'll let him taste some sweetness first. Soon he'll be crying, "Ha ha ha! Fellow Yi, you've worked hard. You've really worked hard." Although Yi Xian did not say what was inside the storage magic treasure, when he waved his hand and sent it out, the light in Hong Tao's eyes had already become burning. Today, he took the storage magic treasure that had abruptly stopped in the void in front of him. After using his divine sense to confirm that there were indeed 36 bottles of Heavenly Nine Treasures liquid inside, his face immediately bloomed with an incomparably brilliant smile. With a flip of his hand, he put away the storage magic treasure and cupped his fists towards Yi Xian again and again, showing incomparable eagerness. In the previous 3 batches, he had already obtained 243 bottles of Heavenly Nine Treasures liquid. Now that he had obtained 36 bottles, the total number of Heavenly Nine Treasures liquid in Hong Tao's hands was already 279 bottles. This was definitely an astonishing number. It was close to 300. Although it was impossible to guarantee that all the Heavenly Tao old monsters in the Chaos Starfield would be given more than 40 bottles, at least half of them would be gathered. Naturally, this made him happy. Even more, the key was Yi Xian's attitude. This fellow was indeed on the right track. He wasn't bragging when he spat out a nail. With him around, this business that had no capital and no profit would probably continue for a long time in the future. The Heavenly Nine Treasures liquid would always be soft. Everyone, fellow Taoist Yi, was injured before. She clenched her teeth and held on for more than 10 days before she finished refining these 5 cauldrons of the 9 Heavenly Tao elixir. If this drags on any longer, I'm afraid fellow Taoist Ye's body will be injured. In his joy, Hong Tao, whose face was flushed red, turned to the thousands of Heavenly Tao old monsters in the surrounding void and looked around. Then he cupped his fists and said, "So, I'm afraid that the refining of the Heavenly Nine Treasures liquid will end here today. However, everyone, don't worry. Fellow Yi is recuperating in seclusion. After he recovers, he will definitely take action again and refine the Heavenly Nine Treasures liquid for everyone. Before that, This old man is willing to undertake the early arrangements for the refining of the liquid so that fellow you won't have to worry about these trivial matters after he comes out of seclusion and waste his energy and time. So if anyone needs to refine the Heavenly Nine Treasures elixir, just tell this old man directly. After this old man returns, this old man will definitely make a unified arrangement and draw up a refining plan. Once fellow Taoist Yi comes out of seclusion, you can immediately start refining. The group of heavenly Tao old monsters in the air were waiting for him to say these words. At this moment, when they saw that Hong Tao had taken the initiative to express his position, they immediately whispered to each other in groups of 2s and 3s. Moreover, someone quickly put forward a request to refine it. This imperceptibly exposed the approximate amount of heavenly Tao origin liquid they had in their possession. No one is to compete with me. After fellow Yi recovers and comes out of seclusion, you must help me refine the first batch of Heavenly Nine Treasures liquid. I also want to refine a batch. Yellow-robed old monster, don't you have 3 types of heavenly origin liquid? The number is just right. How about this old man refine one with you? Fellow Taoist Hong, the 3 of us are willing to refine 1 batch. Also, I already have 5 types of heavenly origin liquid. Even if fellow Taoist can take out 4 types to refine with me. When someone took the lead to express his position, the void instantly became lively. More than a third of the 1,000 or so heavenly Tao old monsters spoke up. Those who were rich could refine a batch of Heavenly Nine Treasures liquid by themselves, and the worst could only refine 1 batch with 4 or 5 people at most. Hong Tao was smiling so widely that he could not close his mouth. According to what he had said earlier, he would receive 40 bottles of Heavenly Nine Treasures liquid as a reward for refining 1 batch, and Yi Xian would give half of these rewards to the Chaos Starfield to calculate. With every batch he refined, he would be able to get 20 bottles of Heavenly Nine Treasures liquid for free. This was truly a win-win situation. The old man was incomparably attentive, and his grin reached the back of his ears. Even though the surroundings of the void were noisy, he was enjoying it, and he continuously used jade slips to record the refinement requirements raised by the old monsters of the Heavenly Tao. Unknowingly, the Heavenly Tao old monsters who had refining requirements gradually surrounded Hong Tao. They scrambled to contact their partners and report their refining requirements. On the other hand, Yi Xian was left out in the cold. When Yi Xian saw this scene, he immediately sneered inwardly. At the same time, the Heavenly Tao old monsters who surrounded Hong Tao and took the initiative to report their refining requirements, whether they were fierce beasts or survivors, were all recorded in his heart. The reason why Yi Xian used the primordial pill tribulation this time to attract the Heavenly Tao old monsters on the left bank and right bank was his ultimate goal. At this moment, all the old men's attention was attracted by the Heavenly Nine Treasures liquid of the Great Tao. They completely did not realize that the Heavenly Tao old liquid in their hands had quietly leaked out in Yi Xian's eyes, and he had already set his sights on it. They also did not expect that not long after, bad luck that made them grit their teeth would descend upon them. Chapter 5139. Fellow Taoists, I am injured, so it is not convenient for me to stay here for long. I will return to the right bank to recuperate. After collecting most of the information, Yi Xian immediately sent out a voice transmission. As for the refinement of the 9 heavenly Great Tao elixir, you can directly contact fellow Taoist Hong Tao in the Chaos Starfield during this period of time. A year later, I will personally come to the Chaos Starfield and start the refinement for all of you. Hearing this, the thousands of heavenly beasts and old monsters in the surrounding void all turned to look. When Yi Xian finished speaking, they all cupped their fists and bade farewell. Hiss! A crisp sound of breaking air rang out. Yi Xian waved his hand and tore open a void crack in front of him. Then, with a shake of his shoulders, he stepped into it and disappeared in the blink of an eye. The old monsters of the Heavenly Tao did not stay for long. They all left one after another. Some of them who had some friendship with Hong Tao returned to the Chaos Starfield with him as guests. They took this opportunity to get closer to him and improve their relationship. Obviously, after today, Hong Tao's status in the right bank of the left bank would rise again. This was because the master of the magic hall, Yi Xian, had clearly made an agreement with him. Yi Xian was only in charge of refining the 9 heavenly Great Tao elixir, and Hong Tao was in charge of all the other trivial matters. This matter spread like wildfire and quickly spread from the right bank to the middle and left bank of the left bank. Presumably, even the right bank of the Milky Way would hear about it soon. This was what it meant. On both sides of the Milky Way, the 9 heavenly Great Tao elixir had always been the only supreme elixir that was helpful in breaking through to the primordial Tao realm. It had been lost for millions of years, and now that it had finally reappeared, it was destined to shock both sides of the Milky Way. However, at the same time, a bloody storm that swept across both sides of the Milky Way would definitely descend because of this. Such a scene had already happened millions of years ago. In order to seize the heavenly Great Tao Elixir, the main ingredient for refining the 9 heavenly Great Tao Elixir, who knew how many heavenly Tao experts would become prey and fall one after another due to being hunted? Xiao. A faint whistling sound rang out as a figure shot over from the dark void in the distance. It was none other than Yi Xian, who had announced that he would return to the forbidden area of the magic hall to recuperate. It was still the right half of the left bank because Yi Xian had no intention of returning to the right bank at all. Before refining the 5 cauldrons of heavenly 9 treasures elixir, he had already swallowed the chaos great medicine and completely recovered from the injuries caused by the primordial pill tribulation. Very soon, Yi Xian fully activated the perfect oscillation spiritual power secret technique. His figure instantly concealed itself, and all of his aura was withdrawn. Not a single trace of unusual aura could be detected in the air. The reason why he stayed at the left bank and right bank was to hunt down the Heavenly Tao's old monsters and seize the Heavenly Tao origin liquid in their hands. Previously, when the thousands of Heavenly Tao's old monsters gathered at the right bank asked Hong Tao for the refinement of the Heavenly Tao origin liquid, they had inadvertently revealed the approximate amount of Heavenly Tao origin liquid in their hands. All of this was seen by Yi Xian and remembered in his heart. In just a short 2 days, he launched a hunting operation. The first target he chose was an old monster of the remnant people. This old monster of the remnant people's cultivation was not bad. He was at the late stage of the 7th stage of the Heavenly Tao realm. From the information he revealed earlier, this person should have about 5 or 6 types of Heavenly Tao origin liquid in his hands. Hundreds of billions of kilometers ahead was the remnant people's star domain that this old monster of the remnant people was overseeing. However, Yi Xian, who had concealed himself and restrained all of his aura, did not continue to advance into the star domain. Instead, he waited outside because that old man had not returned yet. However, it would be soon. This time, Yi Xian did not plan to brazenly carry out the hunt. Instead, he planned to lie in the dark and wait for an opportunity to make a move from time to time. Thousands of years ago, the appearance of the Heavenly 9 Great Tao treasure liquid had once led to a reign of terror on both sides of the Milky Way. In order to refine the Heavenly Tao origin liquid that was necessary for the refinement of the Heavenly 9 Great Tao treasure liquid, countless Heavenly Tao beasts and remnant experts fought and killed endlessly. For example, although millions of years had passed since then, with the reappearance of the lost Heavenly 9 Great Tao treasure liquid, a similar reign of terror would inevitably sweep across both sides of the Milky Way. It could be said that before long, all kinds of killings would begin in full swing and continue endlessly. In this situation, Yi Xian mixed in with it, concealed his figure, restrained his aura, and occasionally made a move like fishing in troubled waters. It would not attract much attention at all. Although, even if he could brazenly rob and kill people everywhere, he would still be fearless. But since he could quietly make a fortune, why would he deliberately attract hatred for himself? No, wrong. Yi Xian was indeed fierce outside. Whether it was on the right bank of the Milky Way or the left bank of the Milky Way, he had done many massacres. But in fact, no matter how chaotic the 2 sides of the Milky Way were this time, as long as Yi Xian did not expose himself when he hunted or killed all the existences that saw him, then, whether it was the Heavenly Tao old monsters on the left bank or the right bank, they would definitely not suspect that he was also involved in this crazy slaughter. The reason was very simple. The other people started a massacre and set off a reign of terror in order to snatch the Heavenly Tao origin liquid. Their ultimate goal in snatching the origin liquid was to ask Yi Xian to refine the Heavenly 9 Great Tao treasure liquid. As for Yi Xian, if he wanted more Heavenly 9 Great Tao treasure liquid, he did not need to hunt and snatch at all. He only needed to spend some time and effort to refine it. For every furnace he refined, he could receive 40 bottles of the Heavenly 9 Great Tao treasure liquid as a reward. Why bother? Rip! After waiting for only 2 days, the crisp sound of ripping silk suddenly came from the dark void about 10 billion miles behind him on the right. Oni crack in the void appeared out of thin air without any warning. Then, a figure walked out of it. It was the 7th-rank survivor that Yi Xian had been waiting for 2 days. Seeing the appearance of his target, Yi Xian's spirit was lifted. A dark light flashed in his eyes, and he immediately rushed over. At this time, he was in the form of a violent ape. He was about 10 feet tall, and he had already taken out the big-headed black stick in his hand. No, because the perfect oscillation mental power secret technique had always been in a fully activated state, This rank 7 survivor who had just torn through the void and arrived didn't notice anything unusual at all. He had no idea that the Grim Reaper was rapidly approaching him. Bang! As he approached, Yi Xian immediately attacked. In the next moment, an earth-shattering sound was heard. Yi Xian, who had rushed behind the other party, raised the big-headed black stick and smashed it on the body of the 7th-rank survivor. Old master, this guy had already reached the door of his house and let his guard down. He did not expect such a thing to happen at all. He did not even have time to react before his entire body exploded in an instant, turning into a scarlet blood mist that quickly spread out. Hoo! Crazy! The sound of the wind whistling rang out. Yi Xian immediately waved his hand, and an incomparably boundless and invisible force whistled out, sweeping the blood mist and the storage magic treasure that had fallen into the air and directly sending them into his body. Hoo! Unexpectedly, Yi Xian's attack succeeded. Before the 7th-rank survivor could react, his body had already exploded, and his body and soul were destroyed. Yi Xian waved his hand at the first possible moment. Accompanied by the howling of the wind, an incomparably boundless and formless force whistled out, sweeping the blood mist and the storage magic treasure that had fallen into the air and directly sending them into his body. Hiss! Then, he waved his hand to tear open a crack in the void and immediately rushed into it. In a flash, his figure disappeared. Half a day later, Yi Xian appeared from the void of another area. His figure was still hidden, but with a flip of his hand, he took out the storage magic treasure that fell from the body of the 7th-rank survivor who had just been killed. After erasing the imprint of the divine sense, Yi Xian checked it and a look of joy immediately appeared on his face. The old monster of the 7th rank was naturally extremely rich. The various precious materials and medicines in this storage magic treasure were simply dazzling, and all of them were top-notch items. While there were 5 types of heavenly Dao origin liquid that Yi Xian was concerned about. Unfortunately, he already had 2 of them in his hands. In other words, the current Yi Xian had 46 types of heavenly Dao origin liquid, 48 portions. However, it was only an increase of 3 types, but after all, it was only a single attack. To be able to obtain such a harvest was already extremely good. This was the true meaning of no cost and no risk. Yi Xian silently made a fortune, and no one on both sides of the Milky Way would have thought of it. Roar! Rumble! Damn you guys, you 2 actually dare to attack this king! At this moment, in the dark void in the distance, a shocking roar suddenly came, followed by the rumbling of thunder and the roar of a fierce beast full of endless resentment. A faint light flashed in Yi Xian's eyes, and he subconsciously turned to look. His shoulders also shook, and he quietly approached. Number after 100 billion miles. 3 figures appeared in the void. 2 of them were survivors, and they were all in the 7th rank of the heavenly Dao. The other figure was a fierce beast, and it was also in the 7th rank of the heavenly Dao. 3 The 2 old fellows were fighting fiercely, and the lone heavenly law ferocious beast had obviously been ambushed. Those 2 heavenly law survivors, who had the same cultivation as him, must have come for the heavenly law origin liquid in his hands. It seemed that this monstrous bloody storm that was destined to sweep across both sides of the Milky Way had most likely begun in the right section of the left bank. The scene in front of him could also be happening in the other areas of the left bank and right section of the right bank. The 3 old men who were fighting fiercely in front of him had similar cultivation levels. Although the heavenly Dao beast was alone, its lifeblood was abundant, and its baneful aura surged into the sky. It should be fine for a short period of time. This Yi Xian naturally would not let go of such an opportunity. The 3 old men did not expect that there would be someone lurking nearby. Furthermore, it was a peak heavenly Dao expert with terrifying cultivation levels. Under such circumstances, Yi Xian's sudden attack caught them off guard. There was at least a 70% chance of them being killed in a short period of time. Roar! Roar? Just as Yi Xian's heart stirred, a cold glint flashed in his eyes, and he was about to attack. A few earth-shattering roars of fierce beasts suddenly sounded from the dark void in front of him to the right. They were filled with endless fury. Turn looking over, for incomparably huge figures were reflected in his eyes. They were 4 astral beasts, and all of them were existences at the heavenly Dao realm. The weakest was at the 5th stage of the heavenly Dao realm, while the strongest was at the 8th stage of the heavenly Dao realm. Yi Xian could not be sure if the 4 heavenly Dao beasts were acquainted with the 7th stage beast that was being besieged. However, since the 2 old monsters were besieging him, the result would be the same regardless of whether they knew each other. These 2 old monsters were really unlucky. Originally, they were 2 against 1, but in the blink of an eye, they had fallen into a dangerous situation of 2 against 5. Today, if they wanted to leave this place alive, they probably wouldn't have much of a chance. As these thoughts flashed through his mind, Yi Xian immediately sighed inwardly. At the same time, he no longer had a chance to make a move. Because if he counted the 4 ferocious beasts that were about to descend, the number of old monsters of the heavenly Tao gathered here had already reached 7. There was even a powerful existence at the 8th stage of the heavenly Tao realm. Under such circumstances, even Yi Xian could not kill all of them in a short period of time. True. If he were to forcefully attack, his whereabouts would be exposed. The possibility of exposing himself was as high as 90%. After weighing the pros and cons, Yi Xian ultimately chose to give up. There were too many heavenly Tao old monsters in the left bank and right bank who had heavenly Tao origin liquid in their hands. There were hundreds and thousands of them. With so many targets to choose from, there was no need for him to expose himself for these few old fogies in front of him. Swish! After he made up his mind, he didn't hesitate any longer. He didn't wait for the 4 ferocious beasts of the heaven Tao to approach him at all before he directly turned around and left. After he was a few 100 billion kilometers away, he waved his hand and tore open a spatial rift before heading to the next ambush location. The next target was not a remnant old monster, but a heavenly Tao beast. It was the one who had clamored that Yi Xian would be the first to refine it a year later. It was a demonic blood wolf mastiff, and its cultivation level was at the 8th stage of the heavenly Tao realm. It was extremely powerful. In fact, compared to the remnant old monsters, Yi Xian was more willing to target a heavenly Tao beast. Because, in order to hunt the remnant old monsters, in addition to the heavenly Tao origin liquid, they could also obtain all the cultivation resources in their storage artifacts. However, after the heavenly Tao beast's body exploded, it would form a majestic blood mist that could be refined into a heavenly Tao blood essence. In order to refine a level 31 primordial chaos pellet, in addition to the 5 elements medicinal catalyst and 81 different heavenly Tao origin liquids, it also required 81 heavenly Tao blood essences. However, Yi Xian only had 55 heavenly Tao blood essences, so he was lacking quite a bit. Therefore, it would be fine if his target was a remnant old monster. However, since it was a heavenly Tao beast, he could not afford to make any mistakes. The heavenly Tao blood essence and the number of heavenly Tao origin liquids vary. It is very likely that there are more than 9 heavenly Tao origin liquids. Yi Xian was determined to get it this time. Swish! After a few days, Yi Xian arrived at the wolf mastiff forbidden land where the demonic blood wolf mastiff was guarding. However, he did not approach it. Instead, he hid in the dark void hundreds of billions of kilometers away from the edge of the forbidden land star zone. He was not sure if the demonic blood wolf mastiff had returned to the wolf mastiff forbidden land, but it did not matter. As long as he stayed here, no matter what kind of ferocious beast passed by, Yi Xian would attack. After killing it with lightning speed, he only needed to search its soul, and he would be able to obtain the information he needed in an instant. What he did not expect was that after waiting for a day, he did not see any of the other ferocious beasts of the forbidden land. However, the real deal unexpectedly appeared. Rip! With a crisp sound of ripping cloth, a void crack appeared out of thin air tens of billions of kilometers away from the right side of the front. Immediately after, a figure emerged from it, causing Yi Xian to be stunned for a moment. His eyes instantly burned. The wolf mastiff forbidden land. Yi Xian waited here for a full day. He did not see any of the other ferocious beasts of the forbidden land. However, the real deal unexpectedly appeared. Rip! An incomparably crisp sound of ripping cloth rang out. Tens of billions of kilometers away from the right side of the front, a void crack appeared out of thin air. Immediately after, a figure emerged from it. It was the demonic blood wolf mastiff of the 8th level heavenly Tao. This old fellow's cultivation was not weak. The 8th level of the heavenly Tao was only 1 level away from the peak of the 9th level. If they were to fight head-on, even with Yi Xian's cultivation, it would take some effort to kill him. Although he was currently hiding in the dark, waiting for an opportunity to launch a sneak attack, this place was not too far away from the wolf mastiff forbidden land. It was only less than 200 billion kilometers away. Furthermore, once Yi Xian made a move, his figure would instantly appear. In this situation, if this demonic blood mastiff wolf reacted and used a secret technique to send a message, even if he was still killed by Yi Xian in the end, Yi Xian's whereabouts would be exposed. He had to be extremely careful in this matter. Otherwise, If he exposed everything just to hunt this demonic blood mastiff wolf, it would not be worth it. As these thoughts flashed through his mind, Yi Xian had already silently shot towards the demonic blood mastiff wolf mastiff. After the other party stepped out of the void crack, he did not delay at all. With a flash, he rushed towards the edge of the forbidden land. Clearly, he had been delayed for some time due to other matters and had only just returned to the wolf mastiff forbidden land. Although the distance of 100 billion kilometers was not close, it was not considered too far for a powerful existence at the 8th level of the heavenly Tao realm. Yi Xian did not have much time left. Otherwise, the other party would quickly enter the wolf mastiff forbidden land's star domain. When that happened, it would be too late for him to make a move. Otherwise, he would definitely be exposed. With a sense of urgency, Yi Xian did not hesitate any longer. With a cold glint in his eyes, he immediately attacked. Phew! With a wave of his hand, a bright red demonic light suddenly flashed. As it expanded, a majestic river appeared in the void. The waves in the river were shocking, and each wave was only about 3 meters in size. However, there was no end to it. It was the red lotus karmic fire that had been conjured. It directly sealed the demonic blood mastiff's path of retreat on the left side of the void. This is the red lotus karmic fire? The sudden ambush caused the demonic blood mastiff's originally rapid body to come to an abrupt halt in the void. It cried out in alarm as its expression changed. At the same time, it turned to look in Yi Xian's direction. Appropriate. Just then, the demonic red light that had transformed into the red lotus karmic fire had shot out from this direction. This demonic blood mastiff was a powerful existence at the 8th level of the heavenly Tao realm. Its divine senses were sharp, so it naturally saw through this. In fact, as it attacked, Yi Xian's concealed figure and aura, which had been concealed by the perfect spiritual oscillation mystic technique, were all exposed. Suddenly seeing his figure, the demonic blood mastiff was stunned. Its face was full of astonishment. Fellow Taoist Yi? How could it be you? Gotcha! Before he could finish speaking, a blood-red lightning bolt with a diameter of millions of kilometers had already appeared out of thin air above his head without any warning. Amidst an earth-shattering crisp sound, it directly struck down. At this moment, Yi Xian pushed the spiritual lightning technique to its limits. This fellow was struck by the blood-red lightning bolt in a moment of carelessness. His body shook violently, and his eyes were instantly dazed. This was the spiritual lightning technique. With Yi Xian's current powerful cultivation, even a peak 9th level heavenly Tao expert would be stunned if they were to be suddenly struck by it. Let alone this demonic blood mastiff who was only at the 8th level of the heavenly Tao. However, just the spiritual lightning technique was far from enough to kill him. It was even a little lacking in heavily injuring him. At most, this demonic blood mastiff's consciousness would be dazed for a few moments. But to Yi Xian, it was only a few short moments, but to Yi Xian, it was completely enough. Go to hell. At this moment, Yi Xian's incomparably cold voice rang out. The big-headed black stick had already reached the target's head. Bang! With an earth-shattering sound, the big-headed black stick smashed down, landing squarely on the demonic blood mastiff's head. This old fellow didn't have time to react at all. His entire huge body instantly exploded, turning into a scarlet mist of blood that rapidly spread out. Huff! However, a heavenly Tao blood essence naturally couldn't be wasted. Yi Xian immediately waved his hand, and the sound of a fierce wind instantly rang out. An incomparably majestic and invisible force whistled out, sweeping up the blood mist and sending it directly to the bottom of the volcano in the central region of the space within the cauldron, starting the refinement of the blood essence. Until now, at this moment, the number of heavenly Tao blood essences in Yi Xian's hands had increased by another one. Previously, he had already reached 55, but now, he had 56. However, he did not feel happy because of this. Instead, after a sound of alarm rang out in his heart, his expression instantly became gloomy. The ferocious beasts of space were different from the survivors of the primordial era. The experts of the survivors all had various magic treasures that they usually carried with them and placed them in their storage magic treasures. However, the ferocious beasts of space rarely had storage magic treasures. The important treasures and cultivation resources in their hands were all stored in their bodies. But now, Yi Xian had killed this demonic blood mastiff with a single strike of his stick. Although he had waved his hand to collect the boundless blood mist formed by the explosion of his body, other than that, he did not sense the aura of the heavenly Tao origin liquid in his body. The current Yi Xian was a peak Heavenly Dao expert at the Great Circle of the Ninth Step. Naturally, there was no possibility of him making a mistake and destroying the origin liquid. As such, there was only one explanation for everything in front of him, and that was that the Heavenly Dao origin liquid in this old fellow's hands was no longer in his hands. It was impossible for an important resource like the demonic blood wolf mastiff to be placed elsewhere, much less handed over to someone else for safekeeping. Considering that he hadn't returned to the wolf mastiff forbidden area until now, Yi Xian instantly understood. The only possibility was that he had just returned from the Chaos Starfield, and the Heavenly Dao origin liquid in his hands had most likely already been handed over to Hong Tao, the person in charge of the Chaos Starfield. The Chaos Starfield that Hong Tao oversaw was a behemoth that was ranked 10th among all the starfields of the remnants of the left bank. Even his personal cultivation and strength could be ranked in the top 20 of all the remnants of the Heavenly Dao on the left bank. In addition, he now had Yi Xian as a channel to obtain the Heavenly Dao origin liquid for free, so the demonic blood mastiff was obviously not worried that he would be greedy for the Heavenly Dao origin liquid. In order to get closer to Hong Tao, in order to get ahead of him to ask Yi Xian to refine the Heavenly Dao origin liquid, it was completely understandable that he would give the Heavenly Dao origin liquid to Hong Tao in advance. And this situation had most likely occurred at Hong Tao's request. In order to ensure his own interests, the old fellow could not wait to obtain the Heavenly Dao origin liquid in advance from the hands of all the Heavenly Dao old monsters who needed it. As these thoughts flashed through his mind, Yi Xian was instantly filled with hatred. His expression darkened as he gritted his teeth. Damn that old fogey Hong, this is simply outrageous. Damn that old fogey Hong, this is simply outrageous. After killing the demonic blood mastiff, although he waved his hand and collected the majestic blood mist that was formed when the body exploded, other than that, he did not sense the aura of the Heavenly Dao origin liquid in the body. This result caused Yi Xian to be stunned for a moment before he came to a realization. He realized that the Heavenly Law origin liquid in the old fellow's hands was no longer in his hands. He immediately gnashed his teeth in anger. According to his estimation, this demonic blood mastiff definitely had a lot of Heavenly Dao origin liquid in its hands, more than 9 types. If he could get it, it would definitely be a shocking gain for Yi Xian. But now, after all this effort, he'd merely obtained a single Heavenly Dao blood essence, yet the expected 9 types of Heavenly Dao quintessence liquids had come to nothing. It was like drawing water with a bamboo basket, and it caused his heart to instantly feel empty and extremely displeased. Although this was only an example, if no measures were taken, similar situations would definitely continue to occur. Because, according to Yi Xian's estimation, the Heavenly Dao origin liquid in the demonic blood mastiff's hands was most likely given to him at Hong Tao's request first. In order to ensure his own interests, the old fellow couldn't wait to get all the Heavenly Dao origin liquid in the hands of the Heavenly Dao old monster in advance. As these thoughts flashed through his mind, Yi Xian's face darkened. He immediately made a decision. No, I can't let him continue like this. He's simply deliberately going against me. Whoosh! With a wave of his hand, a void crack appeared in front of him. Yi Xian darted into it and disappeared in an instant. This time, he did not go far. He hid in a forbidden area for ferocious beasts in the nearby star region. Forbidden area, the name of the place was Eagle Lake. The strongest person guarding it was a blood plume goshawk. Its cultivation was extraordinary, and it was at the peak of the Heavenly Dao Great Circle at the 9th level. This blood plume goshawk also had a lot of Heavenly Dao origin liquid. However, before this, Yi Xian did not plan to attack it at all. This was because the other party's cultivation was not weak. It was almost impossible to kill it silently before it could send out a message. Instead of attacking it, it was better to choose some of the Heavenly Dao old monsters in the middle and late stages to hunt. Although he did not have as many Heavenly Dao origin liquids as the other party, he could at most attack 1 or 2 more times. At least, he could ensure that the news would not be leaked. In reality, even though Yi Xian had his eyes on this blood plume goshawk now, he did not expect to obtain at least 9 types of Heavenly Dao origin liquids. This was because if that was the case, he would have to kill the old fellow. And if he wanted to kill it, Yi Xian would have to use the Shenong 9-colored flames, the Heaven-Falling Bow, or the Red Lotus Hellfire. He would even have to use the strongest form of the 3-headed 6-armed devil ape true body. If that was the case, even a fool would know who the attacker was. As such, he would not be able to achieve his main goal of changing his mind at the last minute and targeting this blood plume goshawk. Whoosh! After waiting for half a day, an extremely sharp sound suddenly came from the end of the void to his left. A cold light flashed in Yi Xian's eyes as he turned to look. In his line of sight, a blood-red arrow was shooting toward him like a bolt of lightning. In fact, its speed was far faster than lightning. The invisible aura of cultivation that it emitted was that of the peak of the Heavenly Tao Great Circle at the 9th level. It was here. The master had come. This blood-red arrow was that blood plume goshawk. Yi Xian was not in a hurry to make a move. Only when the enemy was within a few tens of billions of miles away did he wave his hand and casually take out a gray net. At first, it was only a weak gray light, but it expanded with the wind and turned into a huge net in the blink of an eye. It enveloped the void for tens of billions of miles and just happened to cover the blood plume goshawk's body. Hugging star net? You are. The blood-red arrow that was shooting over came to an abrupt stop. A goshawk that was over 10 million kilometers long appeared in the void. Its entire body was red like blood, and it looked extraordinarily powerful. Especially its pair of eyes. They seemed to have some kind of eye technique that could see through everything and directly look into the depths of the soul. Boom! Before the goshawk could finish speaking, an earth-shattering explosion was heard. A figure appeared out of thin air from his right rib. It was the person in charge of the Chaos Starfield, Hong Tao. At this moment, when he suddenly appeared, Hong Tao's expression was extremely gloomy. Without saying a single word, he directly punched towards the right rib of Old Monster Goshawk. Gotcha! Eft! Screech! It was too close, and the attention of the blood plume goshawk was shrouded in this void. It was attracted by the hugging star net that had just covered its head, so it did not notice the situation below its right rib. Suddenly, caught off guard, Hong Tao's punch landed squarely on the blood-feathered goshawk's body. A clear cracking sound came from within the blood-feathered goshawk's body. It was unknown how many bones in its body were broken. It opened its mouth and spat out a blood arrow. It even raised its head and let out a shocking howl. A dark light flashed in Tao's eyes, as if he was surprised, because after heavily injuring the blood plume goshawk with a single punch, the old fellow opened his mouth and spat out a stream of heavenly Tao origin liquid that was like a large river. He was once the incarnation of the will of the heavens in a large world. Swish! Without hesitation, Hong Tao immediately made his move. With a thought, an invisible and majestic force shot out, and in a tenth of an instant, it had already absorbed the large river that was lying horizontally in the void into its body. Hong Tao, it's actually you. Damned old thing, you are simply shameless. At this moment, the voice of the blood plume goshawk's divine sense suddenly sounded, revealing endless grief and indignation. Look. It seemed like he was furious, but he did not plan to stay and fight, because the punch just now had already severely injured him, and since Hong Tao had already planned to ambush him here, waiting for his arrival, it was naturally impossible for him to stop here. In fact, he had just left the Chaos Starfield. Hong Tao had also suggested that he hand over the 11 types of Heavenly Tao origin liquid in his hands first and let the Chaos Starfield keep them. When the master of the magic hall, Yi Xian, came out of seclusion, he would be the first to refine it. The demonic blood wolf mastiff and the wolf mastiff forbidden area agreed, but the blood plume goshawk refused on the spot. In the end, he was still worried, and his own cultivation was not bad either. He was also a peak Heavenly Tao at the 9th stage great perfection like Hong Tao, so he was completely unafraid of him. However, he never would have thought that Hong Tao would be so crazy. Seeing that he refused, he actually went ahead and hid at the edge of the Eagle Pond forbidden area. When he arrived, he suddenly attacked, wanting to kill him and steal his treasures. This is not over, old thing. Just you wait. Boom! Thinking of this, the blood plume goshawk no longer hesitated. He used his bloodline secret technique and blew up half of the blood plume around him. His entire body once again turned into an arrow, and in the blink of an eye, with the support of the secret technique, he turned into a blood-red bolt of lightning and disappeared into the distance. He really does have a life-saving secret technique. After he left, Hong Tao waved his hand and put away the gray net in the void. As he muttered softly, a dark light flashed in his eyes. He instantly tore open a crack in the void and flashed into it, disappearing in the blink of an eye. Chapter 5140. The one who attacked the blood plume goshawk outside the forbidden area of Eagle Lake was naturally not the real Hong Tao, but Yi Xian in disguise. However, there was no flaw in this matter, and no one would doubt it. The blood plume goshawk's pair of sharp eyes were famous in the left bank and right sector. He was also proficient in a type of eye technique, and he was also a peak Heavenly Tao at the peak of the 9th stage. If someone impersonated him and changed into Hong Tao's appearance, others might be fooled, but the blood plume goshawk would definitely see through it, This was also one of the reasons why Yi Xian chose to make a move on him. Since he decided to give Hong Tao a huge black pot, all the Heavenly Law beasts and old monsters in the right section wouldn't dare to hand over the Heavenly Law origin liquid in their hands to him. Then Yi Xian had to ensure that there wasn't the slightest bit of doubt in this matter. The blood plume goshawk's eye technique was famous enough to ensure this effect. And the reason why Yi Xian was able to fool him was because of the Demon Soul Pupil. The Demon Soul Pupil was a powerful eye technique, and the blood plume goshawk's eyes could not compare to it at all. Naturally, it could not see through Yi Xian's deliberate changes. Furthermore, he had chosen a net bag from the sea of magic treasures in his hands and handed it to the devouring system in his body. With its auxiliary forging system, he forged the Simplicity Star Bag. The Simplicity Star Bag was Hong Tao's famous magic treasure. Yi Xian had hurriedly forged an imitation with the system. Although its power was far inferior to the real Simplicity Star Bag, there was no difference on the surface. Even the aura was exactly the same. It could be said to be perfect. This matter was done beautifully, and Yi Xian was extremely satisfied. Furthermore, he had unexpectedly obtained another type of Heavenly Dao origin liquid, and it just so happened that he did not have it. In this way, he now had a total of 47 types of Heavenly Dao origin liquid, 49 portions. However, this was far from enough, and the hunting operation had to continue. Until, on Hong Tao's side, Yi Xian was not in a hurry. This time, the blood plume goshawk was seriously injured. After escaping, it would probably find a place to heal its injuries. However, the blood plume goshawk would definitely release news about Hong Tao secretly ambushing him before entering seclusion. In other words, Hong Tao in the Chaos Starfield would soon be in big trouble. Hiss! The sound of ripping cloth rang out as Yi Xian, who'd already recovered his appearance, walked out of the spatial rift. However, he was in a state where he'd activated a perfect mental energy secret technique to conceal his body and completely restrain his aura. Therefore, this scene was extremely strange. A spatial rift had appeared inexplicably in the void, but it was completely empty. Not only did no one walk out from it, even the slightest aura could not be captured. Xian's next destination was not far from the void on the right. About 1 trillion miles away, it was still a ferocious beast forbidden land. Only what he didn't expect was that as soon as he walked out of the spatial rift, he would unexpectedly run into an old friend, Xiao. The sound of something breaking through the air rang out. It was extremely weak and almost imperceptible, but it did not escape Yi Xian's sharp senses. In the void to his right, a figure was drifting over like a ghost. It seemed to have been attracted by the void crack that had suddenly appeared here. However, he didn't see anyone walking out of the crack, and there wasn't even the slightest bit of aura. So, he was curious and slowly came over. Clang! At first, there were a total of 33 Heavenly Dao old monsters that joined forces with the Dragon Whale and the desolate Heavenly Dao Green Eyes to encircle and annihilate Yi Xian. 30 of them had already been killed, and only the Dragon Whale, the desolate Heavenly Dao Green Eyes, and the Ghost Realm Forbidden Area's Nightmare 3 were still alive. At this moment, the person who was stealthily approaching from the right side of the void was none other than Pei San. Yi Xian didn't expect this old fellow to have such guts. He actually came out of the parallel void that he was hiding in. Thinking. He must have heard about the reappearance of the 9 great Dao elixirs in the left bank heaven, so he wanted to take advantage of this opportunity to secretly kill some Heavenly Dao old monsters and try his best to get some Heavenly Dao original elixirs. But this is good too. I can get rid of this old man while I'm at it. Yi Xian's old enemies are only Long Jing and Primeval Heaven's Eye. These thoughts flashed through his mind, but he didn't hesitate at all. He immediately took the initiative to meet Nightmare 3. Everything happened without anyone noticing. When he got close to Nightmare 3 in the blink of an eye, a cold light flashed in his eyes, and he immediately attacked. "Old man, how have you been?" At this moment, Yi Xian's figure appeared. There was a mocking smile on his face, and the incomparably cold voice of his divine sense rang out. He instantly transformed into his violent ape form, and with a flip of his hand, the big-headed black cudgel was already smashing towards Nightmare 3's head. "Master of the Magic Hall, Yi Xian? This is..." When the sound entered his ears, Nightmare 3 was shocked. His originally slow figure suddenly came to an abrupt halt in the void. When he subconsciously turned to look at Yi Xian, the expression on his face had already changed drastically, and he cried out involuntarily. Bang! By the time the words left his mouth, a loud noise had already risen to the heavens. This, in the next moment, the big-headed black cudgel smashed down, landing squarely on Nightmare 3's head. This old man was only in the middle stage of the heavenly Tao, and his cultivation was far too weak compared to Yi Xian's. Facing Yi Xian's deliberate attack, he didn't have time to react at all. The moment the big-headed black cudgel fell, his huge body had already exploded, turning into a scarlet blood mist that quickly spread. Huff! This was a heavenly Tao blood essence, so naturally he couldn't waste it. Yi Xian immediately waved his hand, and the whistling sound of a gale immediately resounded. An incomparably majestic and invisible force whistled out, sweeping away the majestic blood mist formed by Nightmare 3's body and sending it directly to the bottom of the central region volcano in the space inside the cauldron, starting the blood essence condensation. At this moment, the number of heavenly Tao blood essences in Yi Xian's hands had increased by 1. Previously he had 56, but now he had 57. Unfortunately, although Nightmare 3 was a fierce beast, his vitality was extremely boundless. With his death, Yi Xian took the majestic blood mist from his body and obtained another heavenly Tao blood essence. However, this old fellow also did not have any heavenly Tao origin liquid in his body. Although he was a little disappointed, Yi Xian did not care too much about this matter. Although there were many heavenly Tao old monsters on the left bank, not all of them had the heavenly Tao origin liquid in their hands. This was something he knew, so he was already mentally prepared. Having gotten rid of an old enemy, Yi Xian was in a good mood. However, this was just an unexpected interlude. Now that everything was over, he no longer hesitated. With a flash of his body, he immediately shot towards his destination. The fierce beast forbidden area was called the Blood Fog Forbidden Area. The strongest old monster guarding it was a demon blood fog deer. Its cultivation was not weak, reaching the middle stage of the heavenly Tao realm. 10,000 a distance of 100 million kilometers was nothing to Yi Xian now. However, after a short while, he arrived near the Blood Fog Forbidden Area. However, he did not enter the star domain. Instead, he stayed 100 million kilometers away from the edge of the Forbidden Planet. With a perfect mental power secret technique concealed his body and restrained his aura. Then he patiently lay dormant in the void, quietly waiting for his target to appear. Outside the Blood Fog Forbidden Area, the void was silent. Yi Xian had already arrived 3 days ago, but he didn't enter the Forbidden Area. He used a perfect spiritual power secret technique to hide his body 100 billion kilometers away. His aura was completely restrained. Then he patiently lay dormant in the void, quietly waiting for his target to appear. The strongest old monster guarding the Blood Fog Forbidden Area was a demon blood fog deer. Its cultivation was not weak, reaching the middle stage of the heavenly Tao realm. With this level of cultivation, Yi Xian could guarantee an instant kill if he suddenly attacked, but this could only be done outside the Forbidden Area. Otherwise, if the other heavenly beasts in the Blood Fog Forbidden Area saw Yi Xian reveal his figure after he attacked, they would immediately send a message. However, Yi Xian could also transform into Hong Tao and attack, just like how he ambushed the Blood Plume Goshawk. However, this kind of thing could not be done too often. Otherwise, he would be exposed. Overdoing it was as bad as not doing enough. This time, he waited for a long time. A total of half a month, but the target still did not appear. Although there were some other Forbidden Area beasts during this period, and there were even 2 heavenly Tao beasts, they were only at the early stage of this realm. Yi Xian was not interested at all. He pretended not to see them and did not make a move. On the 1st day, on the 16th day, just as he was about to lose his patience, this demon blood fog deer of the heavenly Tao realm finally appeared. Whoosh! In front of him in the Blood Fog Forbidden Area, an extremely sharp sound suddenly broke through the air. A fine ray of light shot over, emitting an extremely strong heavenly Tao aura. Furthermore, it was at the late stage of this realm. The demon blood fog deer. This thought flashed through Yi Xian's mind, and he immediately became spirited. He secretly activated the power in his body, ready to attack at any time. However, Mi Quan was suspicious by nature and had a sharp divine sense. Yi Xian wasn't in a hurry to make a move, and instead slowly approached the demon blood-wandering deer. Although his figure had been concealed by the perfect oscillation spiritual power secret technique, and even his aura had been completely restrained, not a single bit leaked out, the demon blood fog deer was a little special. Yi Xian had to be especially careful. Otherwise, if he attracted its divine perception, this matter would go down the drain. Very soon, he was within 10 billion kilometers of the deer. A cold light flashed in his eyes, and the spiritual power source core in his mind slowly rotated. His spiritual power was activated, and he was about to make a move. It was at this moment that the devil blood-wandering deer, which had been heading in this direction, suddenly came to a halt without any warning. Yi Xian frowned. This old fellow's bloodline was indeed extraordinary. Its divine perception was too sharp, and it had actually sensed something abnormal. It might even have realized that danger was about to befall it. There was no time to lose. Otherwise, if it turned around and fled into the blood fog forbidden area, it would be even more troublesome. Unless he gave up on this hunt, the possibility of that happening was definitely not low. The demon blood fog deer was famous for being cautious by nature. With that in mind, Yi Xian didn't hesitate any longer. Taking advantage of the other party's hesitation, he suddenly made a move. Gotcha! In the next moment, an earth-shattering crisp sound filled the air. A blood-red lightning bolt with a diameter of 10 million kilometers appeared above the demon blood fog deer's head. It came out of nowhere and directly struck the deer's head. Boom! 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 With a boom, the two bloody horns on the demon blood deer's head exploded, blocking the attack. Then, without a sound, it turned around and fled back the way it had come. Fruit. However, it wasn't an ordinary vigilance. It was likely that the demon blood fog deer had already prepared for battle the moment its body stopped moving, causing Yi Xian's spiritual lightning technique to miss. It was only slightly injured, and two of its horns exploded. Screech! When he saw this, a cold glint flashed in Yi Xian's eyes. He raised his head and let out a ruthless howl. In an instant, he activated the spiritual power in his body again. In the next moment, he fully activated the Annihilation Spear, one of the two spiritual attack secret techniques. The Annihilation Spear didn't absorb a large amount of spiritual power into a spiritual vortex. Instead, it transformed into an extremely small dot that was like the tip of a spear. Under such circumstances, a large amount of spiritual power was extracted. However, the target of the attack was the smallest. This tiny dot that had transformed into a battle spear was so sharp that it could destroy anything. Wang! Accompanied by a buzzing sound, the spiritual source core that was suspended above Yi Xian's sea of consciousness also began to rotate quickly along with the circulation of the spiritual power. It became faster and faster. In the blink of an eye, a small spiritual bundle formed by the extreme compression of a large amount of spiritual origin power shot out from his sea of consciousness. It was like an extremely dense and heavy thread, carrying the shadow of a battle spear as it rumbled forward. Screech! Sensing the approaching danger, the demon blood fog deer raised its head and roared angrily, but it couldn't change anything. The Annihilation Spear directly pierced through its body, exploding into a bloody mist, but it didn't die. Instead, its momentum tightened, and under the push of this force, it became even faster. Your ability to escape is not bad, but today, you will still. Will you die? Bang! At the same time, the violent ape's figure appeared beside the demon blood fog deer. Before he could finish speaking, a loud sound shook the heavens. Big the black staff smashed down without hesitation, landing squarely on the demon blood fog deer's head. Although the old fellow was at the late stage of the heavenly Tao realm, his cultivation was still too weak compared to Yi Xian's. Facing Yi Xian's all-out attack, he didn't have time to react at all. His entire huge body exploded the moment the black staff landed, turning into a scarlet mist of blood that spread out. Hoo! Yi Xianyu immediately waved his hand, and the sound of a strong wind immediately resounded. An incomparably majestic and invisible force whistled out. The demon blood fog deer's body that had exploded swept over and was directly sent to the bottom of the volcano in the central region of the cauldron, where the blood essence condensation began. As a result, the number of heavenly Tao blood essences in Yi Xian's hands had increased by another one. Previously, he had already reached 57, but now he had reached 58. However, the harvest this time was clearly not limited to just that. As the demonic blood deer's body exploded, the boundless blood mist swept over. Mixed within the blood mist were 4 faint streaks of light. These were 4 portions of heavenly Tao origin liquid. Unfortunately, Yi Xian already had 2 of them, so after obtaining them, Yi Xian now had 49 types of heavenly Tao origin liquid, 51 portions. 1. The cutting was completed in an instant, and the 4 portions of heavenly Tao origin liquid were absorbed into Yi Xian's body. Looking into the distance, Yi Xian spread out his divine sense and confirmed that there was no sign of any ominous beasts in the direction of the forbidden land of blood. After confirming that he had not been exposed, Yi Xian waved his hand and tore open a void crack. He stepped into it. Boom! Right at this moment, tens of billions of kilometers to the left behind him, a terrifying and majestic force suddenly appeared, rumbling towards Yi Xian. Swoosh! An oriole stalks a cicada, unaware of the oriole behind it. Today was strange. Yi Xian had once again encountered an existence that wanted to rob him. Swoosh! An oriole stalks a cicada, unaware of the oriole behind it. This was something that Yi Xian had often done in the past, but today was strange. He had once again encountered an existence that wanted to rob him. As these thoughts flashed through his mind, Yi Xian's eyes flashed with a cold light, and he immediately turned to look. Yi Xian had already exposed himself when he attacked the demonic blood deer, but in order to prevent the existence in the dark from seeing his figure, Yi Xian still shrouded himself in a hazy fog even though he had exposed himself. Therefore, the existence that was hiding in the dark and suddenly making a move now should not know his true identity. What a coincidence. This lord has just rushed over from the middle section, and I actually encountered such a killing and robbing matter. Hee, this is good too. I can relax my muscles and bones, and even obtain some heavenly Tao origin liquid. Just as Yi Xian turned to look, a voice came from behind him. It sounded rather languid, and there was even a hint of condescension in it. It gave people the feeling that it was the tone of a person who had been in a high position for a long time. The other party obviously already knew Yi Xian's cultivation level and strength. He was a peak heavenly Tao at the peak of the 9th level, and was definitely not someone who had just entered this realm. However, he still spoke in such a manner, revealing his contempt. It seemed that not only was his cultivation level not weak, his background was also not to be underestimated. As these thoughts flashed through his mind, the other party's figure was also reflected in Yi Xian's vision. This person obviously also mastered a rather extraordinary aura concealment technique. Previously, Yi Xian had not discovered his existence, which was enough to prove this point. However, as he made a move, this aura concealment technique was unknowingly broken, and his figure was revealed. It was a crocodile beast. Its body was 15 million kilometers long, and its entire body was blood blue. Its body was covered in a layer of blood blue cold mist, and the cultivation aura that was emitted from its body was extremely powerful. It was even stronger than the Longjing, and it was even stronger than the current Yi Xian. Frost blood blue crocodile? You're that frost crocodile from the Frost Crocodile Forbidden Land. The existence ranked 9th on the left bank's Heavenly Tao Ferocious Beast list. As the other party's figure entered his eyes, a cold light flashed in Yi Xian's eyes. He instantly recognized the other party's identity and origin, and he subconsciously exclaimed softly, "Difficult." It was strange that the cultivation aura emitted from this fellow's body was still above the Longjing's. His ranking on the left bank's Heavenly Tao Ferocious Beast list was originally above the Longjing's. Everything was as it should be. It was very clear that this frost blood blue crocodile had rushed from the middle section of the left bank to the right bank, because it had heard the news of the Chaos Starfield's 9 Heavens Great Tao elixir appearing. It should have already heard some things about Yi Xian, but Yi Xian had not brought out his signature 9-colored sea of flames and fallen sky bow, so this frost blood blue crocodile had not immediately thought of him. But, after all, Yi Xian had just used the annihilation spear, and even the big-headed black cudgel had shown its face. As long as this frost blood blue crocodile stayed on the left bank's right bank for a while and understood a little more about Yi Xian, it would sooner or later come to the realization. So, since they had met here today, Yi Xian had to kill it. Moreover, with his personality, how could he let go of this existence that wanted to be the Oriole and kill him for his treasure? Yes, this place was only a little over 200 billion kilometers away from the Forbidden Blood Fiend grounds, and the strongest expert guarding the Forbidden Blood Fiend grounds had just been killed by Yi Xian. Therefore, even if he wanted to fight this frost blood blue crocodile, this was definitely not the place to fight. Otherwise, once the battle started, Yi Xian would definitely use his 9-colored sea of flames and fallen sky bow, and at that time, his identity would undoubtedly be exposed. It would be best if he lured this frost blood blue crocodile to the left bank's right bank, where Yi Xian would be able to go all out and kill this frost blood blue crocodile with all his strength. All these thoughts seemed to take a long time to describe, but in reality, they flashed through Yi Xian's mind like lightning. He instantly made a decision, and without hesitation, he turned around and flashed towards the right bank's right bank. Of course, he did it on purpose. This action of turning around and running without saying anything after discovering the identity and background of his opponent was deliberately done by Yi Xian to show weakness and pretend to be flustered. On one hand, it was to numb his opponent, and on the other hand, it was to create a reasonable factor for him to be injured later. Boom! It was also at this moment that the blue fog that the frost-blood blue crocodile had shot out with a wave of its hand arrived behind Yi Xian. This fog was tens of millions of miles wide, and the cold air within it was astonishing. It was one of the frost-blood blue crocodile's bloodline abilities. Yi Xian had deliberately allowed himself to be hit, because he could see that the killing power of this blue fog was not very strong. Its main purpose was to seal him in ice, and it seemed that this fellow wanted to keep him alive. 1. In an instant, following the crash, this blue fog enveloped Yi Xian's body. The cold air invaded his body, but it was instantly neutralized by the 9-colored divine flames within his body. No. However, Yi Xian did not bother with the cold blue fog outside his body. At least, he did not use the 9-colored divine flames, and only used his cultivation base to resist it. If it was any other heavenly Tao expert, the cold air in this blue fog would be enough to instantly freeze their body into a huge ice cube. However, although Yi Xian's cultivation base was slightly weaker than this frost-blood blue crocodile, he was still a peak heavenly Tao expert at the 9th level of perfection. Therefore, although his body was trapped by this blue fog, it was not completely frozen. Only the outer part of the blue fog was frozen. At a glance, there was an additional blue ice cube that was tens of millions of miles wide in the void, and the center of the ice cube had not yet frozen. There was a figure inside, shrouded by the hazy fog that spread out from his body. He was using the power in his body to escape with the blue ice cube that trapped his body toward the endless darkness ahead. You want to escape? Humph. Now that you've met me, do you still think you can escape? When he saw his opponent shout out his origins, he immediately turned around and fled. He even forgot to dodge the frost-blood blue mist that he had already shot out earlier. He was directly hit by the frost-blood blue mist. Although he was unharmed, his body was trapped in a giant ice lump formed from the frost-blood blue mist. It was obvious that he was in a panic. Frost, a cold light flashed in the frost-blood blue crocodile's eyes, and a proud expression appeared on its face. With a cold laugh, it immediately chased after him. Although the cultivation aura that spread out from his opponent's body was that of a peak 9-step Great Perfection Heavenly Tao, there were many peak Great Perfection Heavenly Tao on the left bank, and there were not many who could be ranked in the top 10 of the Great Perfection Heavenly Tao Ferocious Beast list. Therefore, the frost-blood cold crocodile had absolute confidence that he would definitely be able to kill his opponent today. Furthermore, his opponent was so flustered. Just hearing his name was enough to make him so shocked. Clearly, he did not have much ability. Naturally, he would not give up just like that, and would definitely continue to chase. Whoosh! Whoosh! In the void, an incomparably sharp sound of something breaking through the air rang out. 2 rays of light, separated by a distance of 100 billion miles, streaked across the void and quickly left the area where the forbidden land of blood waste was located, charging into the endless darkness ahead. Whoosh! Whoosh! In the air, an incomparably sharp sound of something breaking through the air rang out. 2 rays of light, separated by a distance of 100 billion miles, streaked across the void. The 2 rays of light were Yi Xian and the frost-blood blue crocodile, who was ranked 9th on the left bank's Heavenly Tao Ferocious Beast list. Calculating the time, it had already been 2 days since the two of them left the area where the forbidden land of blood waste was located. Now they had already unknowingly rushed into the endless darkness ahead of them, and they were even quite deep. Yi Xian's divine sense extended out from the giant blue ice lump that trapped his body, and quietly swept the surroundings to investigate. After confirming that there was no abnormality within 1 trillion miles, a cold light flashed in his eyes, and he immediately made a new move. Huff! In the next moment, the Shinong 9-colored flame was activated by him, and directly shot out from his body. In less than 1/10 of an instant, it directly melted the giant blue ice lump that trapped his body. However, his goal was obviously not just that. After shooting out from his body, the Shinong 9-colored flame that instantly melted the blue ice lump continued to shoot backwards. It expanded explosively in the air, and in the blink of an eye, it had already turned into a vast and boundless sea of 9-colored flames. 1. The cut was so fast that the frost-blood blue crocodile, who was chasing from behind, was completely caught off guard. By the time he realized that something was wrong, a corner of the vast void within 100 billion miles had already been enveloped by this sea of 9-colored flames. Moreover, after a flash, the sea of 9 colored flames rolled inwards and gathered together in the blink of an eye, forming a giant 9-colored flame ball with a diameter of 100 billion miles. While, at this time, Yi Xian and the frost blood blue crocodile's figures were both inside this giant 9-colored flame ball. 9-colored flame sea. You are the master of the magic hall, Yi Xian. 9. The sea of 9-colored flames had already filled the sky. It would be strange if he still didn't know who the other party was at this time. Huh. The frost blood blue crocodile's figure, which was originally extremely fast, suddenly stopped. Its body shook violently, and the shock on its face was incomparably intense. It cried out involuntarily. No, you deliberately showed weakness to lure this venerable one here. Yi Xian, what are you trying to do? Although he had never seen Yi Xian before, he was quite familiar with the dragon whale. On the left bank's Heavenly Law Ferocious Beast list, he was ranked 9th, and the dragon whale was ranked 10th, only one place behind him. Back then, Yi Xian had fought the dragon whale head-on in front of everyone's eyes. In a short period of time, he had seriously injured the dragon whale and made it flee in a sorry state. By now, the news had already spread throughout the left bank of the Milky Way. There were even people who secretly said that the strength of the Magic Hall's master Yi Xian was probably not just replacing the dragon whale and only being ranked 10th on the left bank's Heavenly Law Ferocious Beast list. Although they did not say it explicitly, there was no doubt that Yi Xian's cultivation strength was above his, who was ranked 9th. In fact, the frost blood blue crocodile was extremely shocked by this. Because even if he had fought the dragon whale head-on, he definitely would not have been able to seriously injure it in such a short period of time. However, he had not seen that battle with his own eyes, so he did not completely believe the rumors in the outside world. This time, he had come to the right bank of the left bank to see the strength of the Magic Hall's master, Yi Xian, with his own eyes. One of his goals was to see for himself, but he never would have thought that he would actually bump into the Magic Hall's master, Yi Xian, in such a way as soon as he arrived at the right bank of the left bank. Furthermore, although he had only just found out about Yi Xian's identity, the master of the Magic Hall had already recognized him. Under such circumstances, he still acted so flustered, as if he had lost his courage and fled. That was clearly an act. After thinking about it deeply, there was no need to say more. The master of the Magic Hall, Yi Xian, had already decided to make a move on him. Roar! As these thoughts flashed through his mind, the frost blood fiend crocodile was immediately enraged. After raising his head and roaring, the voice of his divine sense rang out, revealing endless disdain and monstrous anger. Damned fellow, you actually want to scheme against this sovereign? Today, I want to see if your cultivation and strength are qualified to replace the dragon whale and enter the 10th place on the left bank's Heavenly Beast list. Do you want to fight me head-on? Unfortunately, you won't have the chance, because I'm not interested in that at all. At this moment, Yi Xian curled his lips, a cold expression appearing on his face. He was indeed not interested in fighting this frost blood blue crocodile head-on. Although this was the dark void in front of him, with a 9-colored sea of flames in the sky, the commotion was too great. This battle could not be dragged on for too long, otherwise if someone passed by, Yi Xian would still be exposed. Swish! Just as he finished speaking, Yi Xian made his move once again. A bewitching red light shot out and expanded in the wind. In an instant, it transformed into a majestic river. The raging waves of the river were condensed from countless beautiful red lotuses that were only 3 meters wide. It was the red lotus karmic fire that he had just refined not long ago. The frost blood fiend crocodile's cultivation was not weak, and was even stronger than Yi Xian. If he wanted to kill it in a short period of time, just the 9-colored sea of flames was clearly not enough. This could only seal it. If he wanted to kill it, he would have to use the heaven-falling bow. That would cause too much of a commotion, and would probably quickly attract the attention of the Heavenly Dao realm experts in the right section. Furthermore, the heaven-falling arrow would also affect Yi Xian, causing him to fall into a certain degree of weakness. In addition to the heaven-falling bow, the red lotus karmic fire was also one of Yi Xian's strongest killing moves. The power of this mysterious top-notch heaven and earth strange flame was too terrifying. Any living being that came into contact with it would invisibly ignite the sins they had accumulated in their lives, turning into the nether flames of sin that burned their bodies and souls. If it was in the empty void outside, the red lotus karmic fire might not be able to deal with this frost blood blue crocodile. After all, the other party was a powerful existence ranked 9th on the left bank's Heavenly Dao beast list. Even if he did not dare to come into contact with it, he could still turn around and escape. But now, in a moment of carelessness, he has been trapped in the fireball formed by the 9-colored sea of flames, and there is no way for him to escape. Facing the strange and terrifying Red Lotus Comic Fire, his final outcome is obvious. Red Lotus Comic Fire? Screech. In the void opposite, the Frostblood Blue Crocodile sensed danger the moment the Red Lotus Comic Fire that was like a raging river suddenly swept across the sky and rolled toward him. Its body shook violently as it raised its head and let out an earth-shattering roar, revealing endless despair. Yi Xian, if you dare to kill me, you will definitely regret it in the future. You better think twice before you act. As the roar faded, the Frostblood Blue Crocodile's voice suddenly sounded. Although it was a threat, there was clearly a thick sense of expectation and hope that could not be dispersed. In the end, it was not reconciled. Even though it knew that there was not much hope, it did not give up. It wanted to use this method to make Yi Xian fear it and let it live. Unfortunately, Yi Xian was completely unmoved. The river of karmic fire was still shooting forward, but the murderous intent in the rolling waves was even stronger. Since you are so stubborn, I will make you pay the price. Blue Blood Soul Maggot. Screech. Bang. The Frostblood Blue Crocodile was in despair. With a roar, its huge body suddenly exploded. Chapter 51-41. Since you're so stubborn, I'll make you pay. Blue-blooded soul maggot. Screech. Bang! In the face of Yi Xian's unwavering determination, the cold-blood blue crocodile was in complete despair. With a vicious roar, its huge body instantly exploded. At the same time, a faint blue light, the size of a speck of dust, shot toward Yi Xian at lightning speed. It must have been the blue-blooded soul maggot that the cold-blood blue crocodile had roared before it exploded. Damn it! Seeing this, Yi Xian's expression changed. He knew that this blue-blooded soul maggot was definitely not ordinary. After all, it was the final move of a powerhouse like the cold-blood blue crocodile before it exploded. At this moment, Yi Xian couldn't care less about this blue-blooded soul maggot. In other words, he had his own way of dealing with this threat. The real reason why he had cried out in alarm was because of the cold-blood blue crocodile's self-destruction. That's right. He didn't care whether the cold-blood blue crocodile had self-destructed or not. After all, he could still refine a heavenly Tao blood essence with a wave of his hand. Yi Xian. What Yi Xian was really concerned about was the heavenly Tao origin liquid in the cold-blood blue crocodile's hands. Since this old fellow had self-destructed, it naturally wouldn't leave behind the heavenly Tao origin liquid in its body to benefit Yi Xian. It would destroy it in the explosion. However, Yi Xian definitely couldn't sit by and do nothing. He was also a peak 9th stage Great Perfection Heavenly Tao Master. Now that he was so close to the cold-blood blue crocodile, it was entirely possible for him to forcibly snatch the heavenly Tao origin liquid from the cold-blood blue crocodile's body before the majestic energy from the explosion completely wreaked havoc. Everything went smoothly. Yi Xian fully activated his divine sense and mental strength, instantly enveloping the entire area in front of him. He forcibly pulled out streaks of light, which were the heavenly Tao origin liquids. There were 12 portions of 8 types in total. Unfortunately, 5 of the heavenly Tao origin liquids were already in Yi Xian's possession, and they were all identical items. Therefore, after obtaining them, Yi Xian now had 52 types of heavenly Tao origin liquids, 63 types. With the source liquid in hand, Yi Xian's heart, which had been hanging in his throat, immediately settled down. A cold light flashed in his eyes as he immediately waved his hand. The whistling sound of wind immediately rang out, and an incomparably boundless invisible force whizzed out. Very soon, the blood mist formed by the explosion of the cold-blood blue crocodile's body was swept over and sent directly to the bottom of the central region volcano in the cauldron space to begin the blood essence refinement. Because of this, the number of heavenly Tao blood essences in Yi Xian's possession has increased by another one. Previously he already had 58 of them, but now he has 59 of them. Whoosh! At the same time, an extremely weak sound of something breaking through the air rang out in front of him. The dust-like blue light that shot out from the cold-blood blue crocodile's self-destruction directly entered Yi Xian's body and disappeared in an instant. The speed was too fast. Yi Xian fully activated his divine sense and spiritual force and poured it over. He had just pulled out the 12 heavenly Tao origin liquids and had no time to react at all. Wait! By the time he reacted, The blue light had already disappeared. Blue blood soul maggot? What the hell is that? Whoosh! Whoosh! Slightly frowning, Yi Xian muttered softly, but his hands did not stop. With a wave of his hand, the red lotus hellfire that was shooting out was swept back into his body and absorbed into his body. Even the 9-color divine flames that had condensed into a fireball in the surrounding void completely collapsed at this moment, turning into a majestic sea of flames that instantly condensed into a faint dot that entered between his eyebrows. After that, he did not hesitate at all. With a wave of his hand, he directly tore open a crack in the void, stepped into it and went far away. Everything seemed to take a long time, but in fact, it happened in a very short period of time. From the time Yi Xian took out the 9-color divine flames and turned it into a fireball to trap the cold blood blue crocodile, to the time when he tore open a crack in the void and disappeared, it was a total of less than 10 breaths. Li. Before he left, Yi Xian spread out his divine sense to the limit and carried out a comprehensive investigation within 1 trillion miles of the surrounding area to confirm that there was nothing unusual. At the same time, in the forbidden area of the left bank. At the same time that Yi Xian's figure entered the spatial rift, an earth-shattering roar of anger suddenly sounded out from the core of a giant star in the deepest part of the forbidden area of the cold crocodile. Who is it? Who dares to provoke my forbidden area? Roar. This roar appeared so abruptly that it could be heard clearly in the vast space of the star field. The ferocious beasts in the star field all trembled and fell to the ground, trembling. Even the star field was filled with ferocious beasts. Their expressions changed, and they all prostrated themselves on the ground, trembling. As for the more than 30 heavenly Dao fierce beasts in the forbidden area, they were the same. Because the existence that made this shocking roar had an aura that had already surpassed the heavenly Dao realm and reached the primordial Dao realm after the heavenly Dao. However, the aura was not very solid and stable. Obviously, this was a supreme primordial Dao existence that had just broken through the heavenly Dao realm and stepped into the great Dao realm not long ago. Like the ancient existence in the forbidden area of the demonic wolf, it was now stabilizing its cultivation. The outside world only knew that the strongest person in the forbidden area was the frost blood blue crocodile, ranked 9th on the left bank's heavenly Dao fierce beast list. However, they did not know that there was always an ancient frost crocodile lurking in the forbidden area. It was in seclusion in the core of a giant star in the deepest part of the star domain. Counting the time, this ancient frost crocodile had been in seclusion for 1,000,000 years. It had already broken through to the heavenly Dao realm hundreds of years ago, and went to a parallel void to transcend its primordial chaos tribulation. Following that, it returned to the forbidden area of the frost crocodile and continued its seclusion. As it healed, it also stabilized its cultivation. Clearly, the blue blood soul maggot in the frost blood blue crocodile's body was the work of this ancient frost crocodile. The frost blood blue crocodile was its bloodline descendant. Now that it was killed, the ancient frost crocodile seemed to have sensed it, which was why it suddenly let out such a shocking roar. He did not come out of seclusion. This was because although the injuries from entering the parallel void to transcend the primordial chaos tribulation had healed, the realm he had just broken through to had yet to stabilize. It still required some time. However, the ancient frost crocodile was in no hurry. With the frost blood soul maggot around, as long as he came out of seclusion, he would quickly find the culprit who killed the frost blood blue crocodile. No matter who it was, he would definitely not let them go. He would definitely drag them out and refine their souls. Yi Xian was unaware of all this. At that moment, after leaving the dark void where he killed the frost blood blue crocodile, he had just arrived near the abandoned star where he had been in seclusion. Rip! The sound of ripping cloth sounded as a void rift suddenly appeared. Yi Xian walked out of it without pausing. With a shake of his shoulders, he instantly transformed into a beam of light and shot forward. In the blink of an eye, he had entered the abandoned star where he had been in seclusion twice. He went straight to the core. Then, after that, with a flash of light in his eyes, Yi Xian waved his hand and summoned the farmer god's treasure cauldron. He stepped into the mouth of the cauldron, which was shrouded in 9-colored mist, and sat down cross-legged. Whoosh! After entering the abandoned star where he had been in seclusion twice, Yi Xian went directly to the core. He then waved his hand and summoned the farmer god's treasure cauldron. With a flash of light in his eyes, he immediately stepped forward, sat cross-legged at the mouth of the cauldron, and closed his eyes. The reason why Yi Xian returned to the star where he had been in seclusion in front of the right bank was to find the frost blood soul maggot that had sneaked into his body without warning. At that time, this frost blood soul maggot came at him at lightning speed. When it came close, it disappeared as soon as it touched Yi Xian's skin. Even when Yi Xian used his divine sense and spiritual power to explore his body, he found nothing. This made him vigilant, but because a big battle had just broken out in that area, Yi Xian could not stay for long, so he tore open a void rift and left as soon as possible. Now that he had arrived at this star, he immediately sat cross-legged at the mouth of the cauldron and continued to search. In just a few breaths, he had carefully explored the bones, blood, and meridians in his body several times, but still found nothing. Considering its name as a soul maggot, Yi Xian's consciousness immediately entered his soul sea. After searching several times, he finally found some clues. His heart, which had been hanging in his throat, sank in an instant. He had found the frost blood soul maggot, but it had entered the deepest part of Yi Xian's soul sea. Furthermore, it had burrowed into the origin devouring crystal that represented the devouring system. This was troublesome. The devouring system was extremely mysterious to begin with. It was fine if D-Air replicated it, but the one in Yi Xian's body was an origin crystal created by Xing Bo. Even D-Air could not figure it out after many years of research. Calculating the time, this origin devouring crystal had been in Yi Xian's body for a very long time. It had accompanied him all the way until now. But in the past, Yi Xian could not even find traces of its existence. He clearly had a devouring system in his body, but no matter how he searched, he could not find where it was. He also did not know how it appeared. 10 years ago, after Yi Xian stepped into the heavenly Tao realm, he found this origin devouring crystal in the deepest part of his soul sea and even had the ability to separate it. But considering the ability to jump through interstellar coordinates, the fusion system, the forging system, and other heaven-defying abilities, he finally suppressed the impulse in his heart. He did not expel this mysterious origin crystal that represented the devouring system. Instead, he left it in the deepest part of his soul sea, paying close attention to it at all times to prevent any abnormal changes from happening. In fact, even though his cultivation level had reached the peak of the heavenly Tao realm at the peak of the 9th stage, Yi Xian could only pay close attention to this mysterious origin devouring crystal or simply move it out of his body. Apart from that, Yi Xian had no way of knowing the secrets of this origin devouring crystal. Be it his divine perception or mental strength, he was still unable to force his way into the origin devouring crystal to investigate. But now, this frost blood soul maggot that he had finally found had easily entered the origin devouring crystal and turned into a maggot-like substance that looked like a speck of dust. At a glance, the origin devouring crystal now looked like a piece of amber, and this so-called frost blood soul maggot was just a worm sealed in amber. However, this worm had entered of its own accord, which was equivalent to hiding inside. Even Yi Xian could not do anything about it now. Because, be it his divine perception or mental strength, he was unable to force his way into this mysterious origin devouring crystal. The so-called investigation was naturally a joke that could not be carried out. The next moment, an extremely low buzzing sound was heard. Yi Xian activated his demon soul pupil, and a faint beam of light shot out from his soul sea and reached the deepest part of it. It enveloped this origin devouring crystal that was only the size of a nascent soul's fist and looked like a worm sealed in amber. But it was useless. Even the demon soul pupil's beam of light, which was known as the strongest pupil technique, could not enter the origin devouring crystal. It could not investigate anything. This, Yi Xian was dumbfounded, and his heart sank even more. The situation was obviously a little serious. The origin devouring crystal was so mysterious that he, who was at the peak of the great perfection 9th stage of the heavenly Tao, could not enter it at all even when he fully activated his divine perception and mental strength. However, this frost blood soul maggot instantly entered and lay dormant inside. Just based on this point, it could be seen that this frost blood soul maggot was extraordinary. Moreover, since it could enter the origin devouring crystal so easily, it could naturally come out at any time. This was awkward. It was as if Yi Xian's soul sea had become this worm's back garden. It could come out whenever it wanted to. It was simply speechless. Dong. Of course, there was a permanent solution, and that was to directly expel the origin devouring crystal and remove it from the soul sea. But in that case, it was as if Yi Xian had given up on the interstellar coordinate jump ability, the fusion system, and other system abilities. But although this origin devouring crystal was mysterious and came from Xing Bo, it was very likely that there was some kind of shocking scheme hidden in it. It was just that it had not been activated yet. It was also because of this that for Yi Xian, this was a chance to counter Xing Bo. For example, If he removed the origin devouring crystal from the Soul Sea and abandoned it, it was as if Yi Xian had given up a wonderful opportunity to counter Xing Bo in the future. This was obviously not worth it. If he had any other choice, he really would not have made such a decision. Damn it, it's just an insignificant little bug. How can it be so King tormenting people? After a series of fruitless attempts, Yi Xian finally gave up. Sitting cross-legged at the mouth of the cauldron, he suddenly opened his eyes. A trace of hatred flashed in the depths of his eyes. He gritted his teeth and muttered softly. After a while, Yi Xian gradually calmed down. He took a deep breath and contacted the devouring system in his body. In the end, the system was operating normally and there was nothing wrong with it. This made him even more conflicted. If the devouring system had a problem because of this frost blood soul maggot, then no matter how unwilling he was, he could only remove the origin devouring crystal from the Soul Sea and expel it from the Soul Sea. But right now, the system was operating normally. If he really did that, it would undoubtedly make Yi Xian even more conflicted. Forget it. The devouring system is very likely to be a dangerous tumor. Although I've kept it in my body, it has always been closely watched. In the end, a helpless expression appeared on his face. He shook his head and smiled bitterly. Since it's already like this, why should I care if another mysterious frost blood soul maggot enters it? At worst, I can split a strand of my divine sense and keep it in the depths of my Soul Sea at all times to monitor it. As long as there's any abnormality, I can deal with it according to the specific situation. The frost blood soul maggot had directly entered the devouring crystal in the depths of Yi Xian's Soul Sea. This made him feel very depressed, but there was nothing he could do. After some hesitation, Yi Xian finally made a decision. The devouring system was very likely to be a dangerous tumor. Although Yi Xian had kept it in his body, it had always been closely watched. Since it was already like this, why should he care if another mysterious frost blood soul maggot enters it? He decided to ignore all this for the time being. At worst, he could split a strand of his divine sense and keep it in the depths of his Soul Sea at all times to monitor it. As long as there's any abnormality, he could deal with it according to the specific situation. As these thoughts flashed through his mind, he immediately split a strand of his divine sense and directly entered the depths of his Soul Sea. It lay dormant next to the devouring crystal, which was now like an amber, and closely watched it. Swoosh! After all this was done, Yi Xian stepped out of the mouth of the Shenong cauldron, which was shrouded in 9-colored fog. He waved his hand and stored the cauldron into his body. Then he directly rushed out of the abandoned star where he was in seclusion, tore open a void crack and disappeared. Although the death of the frost blood blue crocodile was silent, and Yi Xian was sure that no one had seen it from beginning to end, this matter was bound to cause a shocking storm in the future. After all, the frost blood blue crocodile's background was no small matter. Not only was it ranked 9th on the left bank's heavenly beast list, but the overall strength of the frost blood blue crocodile's forbidden area was also ranked 9th on the left bank's heavenly beast list. Moreover, the frost blood blue crocodile came from the middle section of the left bank and was killed as soon as it arrived at the right section. The other 8 old fellows in the top 10 on the left bank's heavenly beast list would definitely pay attention to this matter. In particular, the Long Jing, ranked 10th on the heavenly beast list, had just been crushed by Yi Xian in a short period of time. Under such circumstances, many people would probably suspect that Yi Xian was the culprit. Therefore, he had to stir up the water in the right and left bank a little more. While this matter hadn't blown up yet, he had to add fuel to the fire. This time, he didn't plan to impersonate Hong Tao anymore. Instead, he changed his target. And that was the Long Jing. The Long Jing wasn't a survivor of the primordial era. In terms of magic treasures, Yi Xian didn't have to worry about it. However, he had to transform into his appearance and reveal the Longjing's bloodline true form. This might be difficult for others to do. Even if he transformed into the Longjing's bloodline true form, it would only be a facade. His aura would probably be easily seen through. However, Yi Xian had the Blood Sea secret technique, so he could transform into any form at will. His size could also be as large as he wanted. Coupled with the concealment of the Supreme Eye technique, the Demon Soul Pupil, it wouldn't be a problem for him to disguise himself as the Long Jing. In the right section of the left bank, the Black Jackal Forbidden Area. The strongest person in the Black Jackal Forbidden Area was an evil-eyed black jackal. Its cultivation wasn't weak. It had reached the late stage of the Heavenly Path realm. This black jackal also had an eye technique. Its eyes had 3 pupils, which were known as the evil-eyed eyes. It had an extremely strong bewitching power. However, compared to Yi Xian's demon soul pupil, it was more than a little inferior. The evil-eyed black jackal was infamous in the right section of the left bank. This late-stage heavenly path was ferocious by nature. Furthermore, it was extremely sinister and ruthless. It was unknown how much blood it had stained its hands. However, with this evil-eyed black jackal, there were still more than 10 heavenly Dao realm beasts in the black jackal forbidden area. However, only the evil-eyed black jackal and 2 others were presiding over the forbidden area. The rest had entered seclusion in the parallel void. There were countless beasts in the black jackal forbidden area, but as birds of a feather flocked together, it resulted in the astral beasts that gathered here. Nearly all of them were ferocious and ruthless existences. And this was the next target that Yi Xian had chosen. At that moment, the entire black jackal forbidden area was silent. Due to the appearance of the 9 heavenly Dao Great Dao treasure liquid, the left bank and right section was turning more chaotic. With the passage of time, the situation was turning worse. With the evil-eyed black jackal's nature, it naturally would not let go of such an opportunity to fish in troubled waters. In fact, the 3 heavenly Dao beasts presiding over the black jackal forbidden area had just returned from outside half a day ago. The 3 of them had joined forces to carry out a hunting operation outside, specifically hunting down lone heavenly Dao beasts. Recently, they had already successfully hunted 3 heavenly Dao beasts. Unfortunately, only one of the 3 heavenly Dao beasts had heavenly Dao origins liquid. Furthermore, it was not a lot. There were only 3 or 4 types, leaving the evil-eyed black jackal extremely disappointed. Half a day ago, they had only temporarily returned to the black jackal forbidden area. Soon, they would head out again to continue their hunting operation. There was still more than half a year before the agreement between Magic Hall Master Yi Xian and the heavenly Dao old monsters on the left bank and right section. They wanted to gather the 18 or at least 9 types of heavenly Dao origins liquid required to refine 2 cauldrons of the 9 heavenly Dao Great Dao treasure liquid. This was because 1 cauldron could only refine 81 bottles of the 9 heavenly Dao Great Dao treasure liquid. And for a pinnacle heavenly Dao at the 9th stage of perfection to successfully break through to the primordial chaos Dao realm after the heavenly Dao realm, they would need at least 40 bottles of the 9 heavenly Dao Great Dao treasure liquid. Now that there were 3 of them, 1 cauldron was definitely not enough. 2 cauldrons were basically enough to satisfy their needs. However, the 3 heavenly Dao beasts, including the evil-eyed black jackal, were only at the 6th or 7th stage of the heavenly Dao realm. On the one hand, it was because they chose to target lone targets. Furthermore, their cultivation had definitely not reached the 7th stage of the heavenly Dao realm. On the other hand, it was because the evil-eyed black jackal's evil-eyed ocular technique was strange and extraordinary. With him covering them, the 3 of them could guarantee that their prey would be successfully killed in a short period of time. Therefore, the 3 old fellows were extremely confident about the subsequent hunting operation. Half a day ago, they returned to the forbidden area to make some preparations. At this moment, they were about to leave together to begin the slaughter. It was at this moment that Yi Xian arrived. Rip! Black in the void of the forbidden ground of Jackal, a crisp sound suddenly rang out. A spatial crack appeared, but no one could be seen walking out of it. Not even the slightest aura could be sensed. It was as if this spatial crack was completely empty, as if nothing existed within it. However, this was not the case at all. In fact, Yi Xian had already rushed out of the spatial rift. At this moment, he was in the form of a violent ape. His body was only about 5,000 kilometers long. He could be said to be extremely slender, but his cultivation was extraordinary. He was at the peak of the 9th stage of the heavenly Dao realm. Swish! After charging out of the spatial rift, Yi Xian raised his head and saw the evil-eyed black jackal and the other 2 that had just walked out of an abandoned planet. However, the 3 of them couldn't see Yi Xian at all. His figure had long since been concealed by a perfectly vibrating mental force secret technique, and even all of his aura had been restrained. The 3 of them turned around in shock. While they were still in a daze at this strange scene, Yi Xian instantly arrived in front of them. Without any hesitation, a cold light flashed in his eyes. He immediately attacked and struck at lightning speed. Swish! Raising his head, Yi Xian saw the evil-eyed black jackal and the other 2 that had just walked out of an abandoned planet. He immediately flew over. However, the 3 of them could not see Yi Xian's existence. His figure had long been concealed by a perfect spiritual power mystic technique. All of his aura had been perfectly restrained as well. Surface the three evil-eyed black jackals were stunned by the spatial rift that suddenly appeared in the void. When they turned around, they were stunned. Also at this moment, Yi Xian silently arrived in front of them. Without any hesitation, a cold light flashed in his eyes. He immediately attacked and struck at lightning speed. Boom! Rumble! In the next moment, a shocking sound rang out. The violent ape's figure appeared, spanning thousands of kilometers. The big-headed black club in his hand directly smashed into the evil-eyed black jackal's head. However, to Yi Xian's surprise, the evil-eyed black jackal did not die. His body did not explode. What exploded was only his three-eyed evil-eyed eyes. Swish, swish, swish. When the evil-eyed eyes exploded, light splashed out from within. It was 7 portions of the Heavenly Tao's origin liquid. Of these 7 portions of origin liquid, only 2 were similar to what Yi Xian already had. In other words, once he collected them, the number of Heavenly Tao's origin liquid in Yi Xian's hands would instantly reach 57 types and 70 portions. Brain as these thoughts flashed through his mind, Yi Xian was instantly overjoyed. With a wave of his hand, he directly swept away the 7 rays of light that had just sputtered out from the exploding evil eyes and absorbed them into his body. Swish! The master of the magic hall, Yi Xian? It's actually you. In this short moment of delay, the 3 heavenly law ferocious beasts that were originally gathered together had already charged in different directions at the same time. The evil-eyed black jackal that had exploded a pair of evil eyes even raised its head and let out a violent howl. Its howl shook the heavens and revealed boundless resentment. Although he was blind and had lost a pair of evil eyes, his divine sense was still the same. He wasn't even seriously injured, so he naturally recognized who Yi Xian was with a single glance. Phew! Upon seeing this scene, Yi Xian suddenly waved his hand as a beam of light shot out. It was none other than Goathorn Immortal, who was hiding in his Shinong's treasure cauldron. Watch the perimeters of the Forbidden Zone. Having been suddenly summoned, Goathorn Immortal wore a blank look. Yi Xian said coldly, "If a single ferocious beast from the Forbidden Zone escapes, you know what will happen." Whoosh! Just as his voice faded, there was the sound of water splashing in the void. Yi Xian's figure dissipated, transforming into a sea of blood that spread out. It enveloped a corner of the universe's void and exuded an endless bloodthirsty aura. Roar! Roar! Swish! Soon low furious roars and vicious howls came from 3 different directions in this vast sea of blood. Alarmed! Amidst the boundless sea of blood, 3 massive figures could be seen instantly rising from the ground. They were none other than Yi Xian's 3 sea of blood avatars. The cultivation auras emanating from them were all at the perfected Heavenly Tao realm at the 9th stage. They were 3 powerful peak Heavenly Tao existences. Even on the left bank of the Milky Way, their simultaneous appearance was enough to stir up a storm of blood now. As their figures materialized, the 3 sea of blood avatars raised their heads and let out a furious howl. They charged in 3 different directions. Swish! Swish! As they charged, Berserk Ape flipped his hands. Instantly, there was a faint sonic boom as a beam of light shot out. The Shenong medicinal pestle transformed into a big-headed black club was dragged by his right hand as it emitted a torrential bloodthirsty aura. Swish! Whoosh! With a thought, the black fog avatar shot out a beam of light from his glabella. As it expanded, it transformed into a vast sea of 9 colored flames. Instantly, it condensed to its limits, forming a gigantic 9-colored ribbon. In just a few spirals, it had already wrapped around the black fog avatar's body in the blink of an eye. The 2 ends of the ribbon extended out from his chest like a venomous snake flicking its tongue. It locked onto the fleeing Heavenly Tao ferocious beasts in front of it. It was ready to charge out at any moment to devour everything. Swish! Roar! As for the skeleton avatar, it did not use the fallen sky bow this time. Instead, with a flip of its right hand, a blood-black demonic blade instantly appeared. Demon, the blade was covered with countless obscure blood patterns. Its shape was incomparably ferocious. It was the withered demon bloodblade. Roar! Rumble! As the bloodblade was summoned, the withered demon blade and the demonic blade instantly let out a shocking roar. The viciousness and ruthlessness that it revealed was simply terrifying. The skeleton avatar was the first to make a move. A cold light flashed in its eyes, and the blood blade instantly soared into the sky. Transform. It was a blood-black waterfall. In the blink of an eye, It had already traversed hundreds of billions of miles in the void and arrived at the head of a heavenly Tao ferocious beast. As the roar shook the sky, it suddenly slashed down. Puff! Without any suspense, a dull puff sounded in an instant, followed by a shocking explosion. This ferocious beast was only at the 7th level of the heavenly Tao realm. Facing the skeleton avatar that was one of the best even among the 9th level Great Perfection heavenly Tao realm, it had no ability to resist at all. Its body instantly exploded, turning into a cloud of blood mist. Hoo! In an instant, the howling of the wind sounded. The majestic blood mist formed by the explosion of the heavenly Tao ferocious beast's body was swept away by the skeleton avatar with a wave of its hand. In the blink of an eye, it was absorbed into its body. Previously, Yi Xian already had 59 heavenly Tao blood essences in his hands. Now that he had one more, the number of heavenly Tao blood essences in his hands had reached 60. While refining a level 31 primordial pill required 81 heavenly Tao blood essences. In other words, just in terms of heavenly Tao blood essences, he was only short of 21 heavenly Tao blood essences. In fact, there were a total of 3 heavenly Tao ferocious beasts guarding this black wolf forbidden ground. However, the one that was killed was only one of the 3 ferocious beasts. Today, Yi Xian would definitely obtain 2 more heavenly Tao blood essences this day. Gotcha? At this moment, a cracking sound that made one's heart tremble came from another direction. The black fog avatar had used the spiritual lightning technique. The heavenly Tao ferocious beast that was fleeing in the void tens of billions of miles in front of him suddenly had a blood-colored lightning bolt appear above its head. The lightning bolt's diameter was tens of millions of miles. As soon as it appeared, it exploded into a sea of lightning, directly enveloping the entire body of the heavenly Tao ferocious beast that was fleeing in the void below. The heavenly Tao ferocious beast was caught off guard and was struck dizzy by the spiritual lightning technique. Its originally lightning-like figure instantly stopped in the void. It was also at this moment that the black fog avatar had already arrived behind it. Without the slightest hesitation, the black fog avatar clenched its right hand into a fist as a dark light flashed in its eyes. It turned from illusion to reality and fiercely punched into the sea of lightning that enveloped the vast void. Rumble! Bang! The sound of thunder shook the heavens, followed by a loud bang. The sea of lightning formed by the spiritual lightning technique dissipated, and the figure of the heavenly Tao ferocious beast disappeared. In the void, an incomparably majestic blood mist was rapidly spreading. Chapter 51-42. Rumble, rumble, rumble. Bang! As the black mist clone clenched his right hand into a fist, it turned from nothingness to reality and fiercely punched into the sea of lightning that enveloped the vast void. Immediately after, there was a loud bang. The sea of lightning formed by the spiritual lightning technique dissipated, and the figure of the heavenly beast disappeared. In the air, an incomparably majestic blood mist was rapidly spreading. Except for the essence liquid. This caused Yi Xian to be rather disappointed, because this meant that the heavenly origin liquid in the hands of these 3 fellows had been placed together. In other words, the 8 portions of heavenly origin liquid that splashed out from the pair of evil eyes that the violent ape had just blasted apart was most likely the total amount of origin liquid in the hands of these 3 old fellows. Because there was also no heavenly origin liquid in the body of the heavenly beast that the skeleton clone had killed with the withered demon blood blade. However, the evil-eyed black jackal might still have other origin liquids in its hands. As for whether that was the case, he would naturally know after it was killed. Huff! As these thoughts flashed through his mind, the black mist clone waved his hand and absorbed the majestic blood mist that was spreading out into his body. Then, he turned to look in the direction that the violent ape was chasing. The violent ape was chasing after the blind evil-eyed black jackal. This black jackal was only at the 7th stage of the heavenly Tao, and had just entered the late stage of this realm. Compared to the violent ape, who was at the peak of the 9th stage of the heavenly Tao, it was not just a little bit weaker. Although, after his eyes exploded, he took advantage of the fact that Yi Xian had collected the 8 portions of heavenly origin liquid, and even before the 3 blood sea clones had condensed, he had already turned around and fled with all his might. However, the difference in cultivation between the 2 sides was too great. In a short period of time, the violent ape had already caught up to him, and was only about 40 to 50 billion kilometers away. Boom! Rumble! Without hesitation, as a cold light flashed in his eyes, Bao Yuan channeled the power in his body to the extreme. He flipped his right hand, and the big-headed black stick that was originally behind him was swung high in an instant, smashing forward fiercely. The evil-eyed black jackal was already lightly injured, so it couldn't withstand the full-force attack of the violent ape. When the big-headed black stick smashed into its head, its entire body instantly exploded, and a majestic mist of blood spread out. This. At this moment, disappointment flashed across Bao Yuan's eyes. This was because after the evil-eyed black jackal was killed, no more heavenly law origin liquid appeared in its body. It was very obvious that the first 8 portions he obtained was the total amount of origin liquid in the hands of these 3 old fellows. Phew! As these thoughts flashed through his mind, Bao Yuan sighed softly. With a wave of his hand, an invisible majestic force surged out. In the blink of an eye, the majestic blood mist formed by the explosion of the evil-eyed black jackal's body was absorbed into his body. He sent it to the central region volcano of the Shenong Cauldron to begin the refinement of blood essence. First before, Yi Xian already had 60 heavenly law blood essences in his hands. Now that he had 2 more, the number of heavenly law blood essences in his hands had already reached 62. He was getting closer and closer to the 81 heavenly law blood essences required to refine the level 31 grand mist pellet. All of this took a long time to describe, but in fact, it happened in a dozen breaths. In less than a moment, the 3 heavenly law ferocious beasts guarding the black jackal forbidden land had all been killed. But Yi Xian didn't intend to leave because he had already revealed himself when he killed the 3 old fellows. All the ferocious beasts in the forbidden areas in the abandoned stars in the forbidden area saw him. So before leaving, he had to solve this matter. Today he wanted to completely destroy the entire black jackal forbidden land, just like the ghost domain forbidden land before, leaving nothing behind and turning it into a dead area. There was nothing he couldn't do. The environment of the starry sky was like this: the strong preyed on the weak. Not to mention that the people gathered in the black jackal forbidden land were all ferocious and ruthless existences. They were stained with blood, so they should be killed under the might of the heavens. Boss, don't worry, none of them escaped. At this time, seeing that Yi Xian had already stopped, the goat horn immortal immediately ran over with a fawning expression. He was only a rank 1 heavenly law, but the 3 heavenly law ferocious beasts that were killed by Yi Xian in just a dozen breaths of time were all rank 6 and 7. Seeing this kind of ruthless slaughter with his own eyes, the fear in the old fellow's heart could be imagined. He was really worried that Yi Xian would be so excited that he'd kill him as well. All right, there's nothing else for you to do. Yi Xian nodded and casually replied. He then waved his hand and stored the goat horn immortal into the Shenong treasure cauldron. Swish! Swish swish! A faint sound of breaking through the air sounded, and the 3 blood sea clones shot out. Soon, they guarded the edge of the void around the black jackal forbidden land to prevent any ferocious beasts from escaping. Immediately afterward, a cold light flashed in the eyes of the skeleton clone, and a bloody light shot out from between his eyebrows. The bloody light soared in the wind, and its speed was too fast. In the blink of an eye, it turned into a blood-black demonic blade. It was thousands of miles long, and its shape was extremely ferocious. There was a blood-black demonic mist swirling around it, emitting a murderous intent. It could be said to be extremely ferocious. It was the withered demon bloodblade that he put away after the attack just now. Screech! As soon as the bloodblade was summoned, it immediately blasted toward an abandoned star in the depths of the forbidden land ahead. The huge blade instantly let out a shocking roar, and a murderous aura soared into the sky. Entangling the black demonic mist swirling around the demonic blade also began to change rapidly, instantly turning into a terrifying demon god that was thousands of miles long. It stood upright and looked extremely ferocious. Hiss! Under the withered demon blood mouth, countless ferocious beasts in this star were sucked into its mouth in an instant. It chewed and swallowed like a giant whale swallowing the sea. A shocking and bloody massacre unfolded. Roar! Screech! Screech, screech, screech. Everything that happened in the air was too terrifying. The ferocious beasts in the abandoned stars in the black jackal forbidden land were all trembling. In endless fear and despair, they roared wildly. The entire void of the forbidden land was in an uproar, which formed a sharp contrast to the deathly silence before. Swish! In just a few seconds, all the ferocious beasts in the forbidden land in an abandoned star had been completely devoured. But this was just the beginning. After tasting the sweetness, the withered demon blood blade circled and changed its direction in an instant. In the blink of an eye, it rushed above the second abandoned star. The ferocious withered demon blood blade, which was thousands of miles long, raised its head and roared, opening its bloody mouth again. For all this, Yi Xian did not pay attention to it at all. The three Blood Sea avatars stood in different directions at the edge of the Black Jackal Forbidden Land. Their eyes flashed with a cold light as they watched everything closely, quietly waiting for the monstrous slaughter to end. Swish! After a few days, everything was settled. Accompanied by an incomparably sharp sound, the withered demon blood blade that had swallowed all the ferocious beasts in the abandoned stars in the Black Jackal Forbidden Land also returned at this moment. It turned into a ray of light that penetrated into the space between Yi Xian's eyebrows and disappeared. In the Black Jackal Forbidden Land, an unprecedented slaughter broke out in the void, but all this was completely unknown to the outside world. No ferocious beasts could escape from the Forbidden Land. Yi Xian's three Blood Sea avatars were guarding the edge of the star field like a demon god. Swish! In just half a day, everything was settled. Sharp at this moment, an incomparably sharp sound suddenly sounded. All the ferocious beasts in the abandoned stars in the Black Jackal Forbidden Land had been swallowed in half a day. Withered. The demonic blood blade also returned at this moment, turning into a ray of light that penetrated into the space between Yi Xian's eyebrows and disappeared. Walala! The next moment, a strange sound came, and the three Blood Sea avatars that were standing in different directions at the edge of the Black Jackal Forbidden Land collapsed, turning into three majestic bloody rivers that gathered together in the blink of an eye, and then condensed into a point in an instant. Swish! With a flash of bloody light, the bloody point condensed by the majestic Blood Sea instantly expanded again. In the blink of an eye, it was 50 million miles long, but it was not a ferocious ape, nor was it the real body of the demonic ape with 3 heads and 6 arms, but it was a dragon whale. Whether it was the size or the aura, it was exactly the same as the dragon whale in the Dragon Whale Forbidden Land, which was ranked 10th on the left bank's heavenly beast list. It was the body transformed by Yi Xian using the Blood Sea secret technique, and coupled with the power of the demonic soul pupil, he was now the dragon whale. Even the peak heavenly way with the same cultivation as Yi Xian would not be able to see any clues. In an instant, Yi Xian activated his divine sense and swept out together with the invisible spiritual power. In half a breath, it had already enveloped the entire vast Black Jackal Forbidden Land. Vast. In the boundless void of the Forbidden Land, the abandoned stars had been completely dead. Yi Xian carefully searched several times in succession, and after confirming that there were no fish that escaped the net, and there were no other abnormalities, he was relieved. A dim light flashed in the eye, and he withdrew his divine sense, but the invisible spiritual power extended out of the Black Jackal Forbidden Land star region. The Black Jackal Forbidden Land was extinct. Not only were the 3 heavenly way ferocious beasts in the Forbidden Land killed, but all the ferocious beasts in the Forbidden Land were also killed without exception. While Yi Xian also obtained 3 heavenly way blood essences, 8 portions of heavenly way origin liquid, and various other cultivation resources because of this. The harvest was definitely not small. But this was definitely not the ultimate purpose of his arrival in the Black Jackal Forbidden Land. He came here to give that old guy the dragon whale a huge black pot, just like how he framed Hong Tao in the Chaos Starfield. The cold-blood blue crocodile from the middle section of the left bank, ranked 9th on the Heavenly Way Ferocious Beasts list, was too sensitive. Now that it had been killed by Yi Xian, the news had probably spread, and it was easy for people to point the finger of suspicion at Yi Xian. The cold-blood blue crocodile's cultivation was not weak, and there might be more than one powerful existence in the right section of the left bank that could kill it. After all, there were many ancient experts in seclusion in the parallel void, but there were definitely not many such existences. Yi Xian had pretended to be the dragon whale to exterminate the entire Black Jackal Forbidden Land. Once this matter was discovered and the news spread, the dragon whale's crazy actions could more or less draw away some of the suspicious gazes of Yi Xian. But now that all the ferocious beasts in the Forbidden Land had been exterminated, if Yi Xian left now, this purpose could not be achieved. Therefore, he did not escape immediately, but lay dormant in the Black Jackal Forbidden Land's star domain. He quietly extended his invisible spiritual power and began to investigate outside the star domain. The purpose of this was only to find a witness who had inadvertently seen the dragon whale's departing figure. Half a day later, the dragon whale's eyes suddenly flashed. Obviously, it had found something. Without hesitation, it rushed out of the Black Jackal Forbidden Land's star domain in an instant. Roar! As soon as it rushed out of the Black Jackal Forbidden Land, the dragon whale, which was 50 million kilometers in size, raised its head and let out a furious roar. Its murderous intent was shocking, and it revealed an endless bloody and violent aura. In the dark void hundreds of billions of kilometers to the right, there were 2 early-stage heavenly Tao realm astral beasts. They were not heading for the Black Jackal Forbidden Grounds. They were merely passing by in that void. But at this moment, because of the dragon whale's shocking roar, the two early-stage Heavendao ferocious beasts trembled, and they immediately activated the power in their bodies to hide their bodies. They also tried to restrain their auras as much as possible. All of this was like a conditioned reflex, a completely subconscious reaction, so their speed was very fast. At least, the dragon whale, who had just rushed out of the Black Jackal Forbidden Land star domain, definitely did not notice because the two Heavendao ferocious beasts were quietly beside him. Hiss! After the roar, the dragon whale swung its tail in the void, and accompanied by the crisp sound of ripping cloth, a void crack instantly appeared in the void in front of it. The dragon whale hissed, and its entire body turned into a ray of light that blasted away, and in the blink of an eye, it rushed into the void crack and disappeared. The air fell into silence again, but the two Heavendao ferocious beasts who had hidden themselves did not leave. After waiting for another incense stick to burn and confirming that there was no abnormality, they revealed their figures and carefully moved toward the Black Jackal Forbidden Land. Xiao! Xiao! The sound of the air resounded as these two ferocious beasts of the heavenly Dao entered the star region of the Black Jackal Forbidden Land. Facing the vast star region that was deathly silent before them, the two of them exchanged glances, and both of their eyes revealed a wisp of dense suspicion that couldn't be dispersed. Good. Curious, they quickly spread out the power of their divine sense, enveloping the endless void in the Black Jackal Forbidden Land's star domain. Especially those silent and terrifying abandoned stars, they began to carefully investigate. In an instant, the two Heavendao ferocious beasts trembled violently, and their expressions changed dramatically. Then, there was a series of exclamations from their mouths, revealing endless shock and horror. Oh my God, what happened? The entire Black Lupus Forbidden area has actually completely transformed into a dead zone. All the beasts of the Forbidden Land have been killed, including the evil-eyed Black Jackal and other Heavendao ferocious beasts. The void is filled with a strong smell of blood. This is clearly a sign that the shocking slaughter has just ended. Long Jing. It must be Long Jing who did it. Crazy. This guy must be crazy. For the Heavendao origin liquid, he can even do something like exterminating a forbidden land. He is simply insane. What else does he not dare to do? No, this matter is too shocking. It must be spread out. Now, the right part of the Milky Way is already surging with turbulence. Many areas are erupting with earth-shattering battles, but everything should have a bottom line. Why would the beasts of the Forbidden Land do this? That's right. There should be a limit to this kind of hunting. Otherwise, the bloody storm this time will even exceed the one 1,000,000 years ago. The two sides of the Milky Way will usher in an unbearable catastrophe. The evil deeds of the dragon whale slaughtering the Black Jackal Forbidden Land must be spread out. No, this matter is too shocking. It must be spread out. Now, the right part of the Milky Way is already surging with turbulence. Many areas are erupting with earth-shattering battles, but everything should have a bottom line. Why would the beasts of the Forbidden Land do this? Long Jing's actions are too cruel. Yes, there should be a limit to this kind of hunting. The killing between the Heavendao old monsters is one thing, but it should not affect the beasts of other forbidden lands under the Heavendao. Otherwise, everything will be in chaos. Who doesn't have a forbidden land behind us? Who doesn't have bloodline descendants? The extermination of one side must not happen again. This time, the bloody storm is no small matter. Perhaps 1,000,000 years ago, both sides of the Milky Way will usher in an unbearable catastrophe. Long Jing's evil deeds of slaughtering the Black Jackal Forbidden Land must be spread out. Roar! Roar! Under the fury of their leader, the two Heavendao ferocious beasts raised their heads and roared. Then, they did not stay any longer. They turned around and rushed out of the Black Jackal Forbidden Land. They directly tore open a crack in the void and left. Whoosh! After the two of them left, in the dark void hundreds of billions of miles to the left, there was a faint sound of something breaking through the air. An invisible light shot over and arrived in front of them in the blink of an eye. It was Yi Xian. At this time, he had returned to his human form, but he was in the state of the perfect vibration of his spiritual power. Therefore, his body was hidden, and his qi was perfectly restrained. There was absolutely no need to worry about being seen through. Previously, he did not leave because he was worried. He wanted to see the exact result. Now that he saw the two heavenly law beasts angrily charge out of the Black Jackal Forbidden area and tear through space as soon as possible, The corners of Yi Xian's mouth curled into a satisfied smile. Without any hesitation, he turned around and left. There were still 10 months, a full 300 days, before the 1-year agreement with the Heavendao old monsters on the right bank. He was not in a hurry to go to the Chaos Starfield, nor did he plan to return to the right bank. After all, he did not have enough Heavendao blood essence and Heavendao origin liquid. The follow-up hunting had to continue. Hong Chaos Starfield. Calculating the time, 2 months had passed since the 1-year agreement between Yi Xian and the Heavendao old monsters on the right bank. In another 10 months, which was 300 days, the master of the magic hall, Yi Xian, would come to the Chaos Starfield again to refine the Heavendao 9 elixir of the Great Tao. Every time they thought about this, the 20 or so survivors of the Heavendao old monsters in the Chaos Starfield would feel a sense of happiness in their hearts. Brilliant smiles bloomed on their faces. How could they not be happy? 10 years later, once the master of the magic hall, Yi Xian, came, they would be able to obtain a large amount of the Heavendao 9 elixir of the Great Tao. Although the master of the magic hall, Yi Xian, would get half of the 40 bottles of Heavendao 9 elixir of the Great Tao, which fell into the hands of the Heavendao old monsters in the Chaos Starfield, there were only 20 bottles of the Heavendao 9 elixir of the Great Tao. If there were 20 bottles in one batch, then what about 10 batches or 100 batches? This was definitely an extremely profitable transaction. Ancestor Chaos Starfield, who had passed away 1,000,000 years ago, was simply too talented. Not only did he create a supreme resource like the Heavendao 9 elixir of the Great Tao, he even thought of such a great opportunity to make a fortune. Even after 1,000,000 years had passed, they were still profiting from it. It could be said that the 9 Heavens Grand Tao elixir, which had been lost on the right bank for millions of years, had once again appeared. The true winner was definitely the Chaos K Starfield. If the other Heavendao old monsters of the right bank, whether they were space beasts or survivors of the primordial era, wanted to ask the master of the magic hall, Yi Xian, to refine the Heavendao 9 elixir of the Great Tao, not only did they have to prepare the Heavendao origin elixir of the Great Tao themselves, but they also had to fork out 40 bottles of the Great Tao 9 elixir of the Great Tao as a reward. This was definitely a heartache, but they had no choice. For the sake of the Heavenly 9 Great Tao precious liquid, even if they suffered a bit of loss, they had to clench their teeth and endure. Even for the master of the magic hall, Yi Xian, even though he was the only existence on both sides of the Milky Way who could refine the 9 heavenly treasures elixir of the 9 heavenly treasures elixir, when it came to this matter, even though he was given 20 bottles of 9 heavenly treasures elixir per cauldron, he was still the one in charge of the refinement. After all, he had put in the effort. What about the old monsters of the Heavenly Tao in Chaos K Starfield? When there was no need for them to take out the various materials required to refine the Heavenly 9 treasures elixir, nor did they need to spend any effort to refine it. All they had to do was wait for cauldrons of Heavenly 9 treasures elixir to come out of the furnace, and then give out 20 bottles of Heavenly 9 treasures elixir for free. This is clearly a profit, and there were no other restrictions. As long as the master of the magic hall, Yi Xian, started refining the 9 heavenly treasures elixir, as long as there was a market on both sides of the Milky Way for the supreme elixir, they would be able to obtain it without any effort. It was precisely because of this that for the past 2 months, the entire Chaos K Starfield had always been filled with an atmosphere of joy and excitement. Not only were Hong K and the other old monsters of the Heavenly Tao feeling refreshed, even the remnant citizens of the Starfield with a cultivation base below the Heavenly Tao realm were overjoyed. Especially in the first 10 days 2 months ago, the old monsters of the Heavenly Tao on the right bank had followed Hong Tao back to the Chaos K Starfield, and under his persuasion, they would do their best to be at the front when the 9 heavenly treasures elixir was refined in the future. In the end, when they handed over the Heavenly Tao origin elixir in their hands to Hong Tao, the joy in the hearts of the old monsters of the Chaos K Starfield burned even brighter. Although some of the old monsters of the Heavenly Tao were still worried, and did not hand over the Heavenly Tao origin elixir in their hands to Hong Tao in advance. However, there were many old monsters of the Heavenly Tao who were successfully persuaded by Hong Tao. Most of them handed over 1 or 2 cauldrons of materials needed to refine the 9 heavenly treasures elixir in advance, including the Heavenly Tao origin elixir. Even if it was a small amount, 2 or 3 of them would work together to gather a cauldron of materials and hand it over to Hong Tao in advance. Fine. After all, the Heavenly Tao origin elixir and the other materials that Hong Tao had handed over in advance were enough to refine nearly 100 cauldrons of 9 heavenly treasures elixir. Putting the rest aside for the time being, just the nearly 100 cauldrons of materials were enough for the old monsters of the Heavenly Tao in the Chaos K Starfield to obtain a huge amount of 9 heavenly treasures elixir. 1. 20 bottles per cauldron, 200 bottles per cauldron, and 2,000 bottles per cauldron. If this was not a huge amount of 9 heavenly treasures elixir, what was it? And there was nothing wrong with it. As a matter of fact, after obtaining nearly 100 furnaces worth of materials, the 20 or so old gods of Heaven's Path in Chaos Starfield had been in an extremely excited state almost every day for the past 2 months. They had been impatient for a long time, wishing that the remaining 10 months could pass in the blink of an eye. That way, the master of the magic hall, Yi Xian, would descend here, and the long-awaited 9 heavenly treasures elixir would continuously fall into their pockets. Only, yes, what they never expected was that before the 1-year deadline was 10 months away, before the arrival of the master of the magic hall, Yi Xian, a huge storm that no one had expected was already approaching the Chaos K Starfield. Swish! An incomparably clear sound of something breaking through the air rang out. In the dark void about 100 billion kilometers away from the edge of the Chaos K Starfield, a spatial crack suddenly appeared. Following that, a blood-red light shot out from the crack and expanded with the wind. In an instant, it transformed into an incomparably gigantic space beast. Its entire body was covered in demonic feathers, and its pair of eagle eyes were as cold as lightning. It emitted an incomparably sharp intent, as if it could see through everything and see through one's mind. The cultivation aura emitted from the body of this fierce beast was not weak. It had already reached the peak of the heavenly Tao of the 9th stage. Shockingly, it was the blood plume goshawk that had been ambushed by Yi Xian earlier. No, when Yi Xian ambushed him that day, he had activated the Blood Sea secret technique and transformed into Hong Tao's appearance. Furthermore, although this blood plume goshawk had an eye technique, it was far from being able to compare to Yi Xian's demon soul pupil. Therefore, he was unable to see through it at all, and was instead certain that everything he saw was true. In addition, Yi Xian had specially refined a simple star bag that was completely identical in shape and aura, which was one of Hong Tao's famous magic treasures. Therefore, in the blood plume goshawk's knowledge, the one who ambushed him that day was the person in charge of the Chaos K Starfield, Hong Tao. There was no suspense at all. Screech! Hong Tao, get out for this venerable one. At this time, the blood plume goshawk had been in seclusion to recover from the injuries caused by Yi Xian's sneak attack that day. He had rushed to the Chaos K Starfield immediately. His purpose was obvious. Naturally, he had come to settle accounts with Hong Tao. During this period of time, he had been so angry that he felt like he was suffocating. Now that he had recovered from his injuries and had arrived at the Chaos K Starfield, he naturally would not be polite. He immediately raised his head and let out an earth-shattering roar. The blood plume goshawk was a peak heavenly Tao of the 9th stage. Now that he had flown in anger, his roar instantly rushed into the Chaos K Starfield in front of him. All the survivors on the abandoned stars in the starfield heard it clearly. Shock and bewilderment appeared on their faces as they all looked up. The Chaos K Starfield had obviously been very lively recently. From time to time, some survivors and fierce beasts would come and go. Although the survivors and the fierce beasts were old enemies, they generally would not fight each other when they reached the Almighty Realm or above. They were all starry sky masters who pursued the Great Tao. Unless there was a conflict of interest, they would not engage in meaningless killing. But, now, the heavenly 9 Great Tao treasure liquid had reappeared. For the treasure liquid, these heavenly Tao fierce beasts and the survivors all came to the Chaos K Starfield one after another. They were harmonious with each other and would not easily attack each other in public. But, in fact, other than the heavenly Tao old monsters, there were also some almighties and desolate supremacy ferocious beasts who came to the Chaos Starfield with the survivors. They all had some top-grade heavenly materials and earthly treasures, some of which could be used as supplementary materials to refine the 9 heavenly Tao elixir. That was why they came here to sell, barter, or make friends with the heavenly Tao old monsters. In the vast starry sky, this kind of thing was very common. But it was also because of this that many survivors and fierce beasts could be seen outside the Chaos K Starfield at this time. Some were far and some were close. With the blood plume goshawk's shocking roar, everyone's faces were filled with shock. They all turned around, not knowing what had happened. Blood plume, what are you doing? Why do you look so murderous? Are you planning to rob us in the Chaos K Starfield? Soon, more than a dozen figures rushed out of the Chaos K Starfield. They were all the heavenly Tao old monsters, and the leader was Hong Tao. At this time, his face was gloomy, and his eyes were shining with hostility. He stopped at the edge of the starfield, facing the blood-plume goshawk from 100 billion miles away. "Shut up," he sneered and continued. "If that's really the case, you'd better think it over carefully. The Chaos K starfield is not the same as before. Let's not talk about whether you can afford to offend it. If you really want to do something reckless, I'm afraid the cultivators in the right part of the starfield won't agree." He had the confidence to say that. On the one hand, the Chaos K starfield had the right to refine the Heavenly Nine Great Tao treasure liquid that had appeared on the left bank after millions of years. On the other hand, Hong Tao had collected nearly 100 furnaces of the Heavenly Nine Great Tao treasure liquid in advance. These materials came from hundreds of Heavenly Tao old monsters, and they were all very important to them. If the blood-plume goshawk really dared to rush into the Chaos K starfield and act recklessly, even if Hong Tao didn't do anything, the Heavenly Tao old monsters who had handed the Heavenly Nine Great Tao treasure liquid to Hong Tao in advance would definitely not sit back and do nothing. If there was a big mess, who would take the responsibility if something happened to the materials they handed over? It was precisely because of this that when Hong Tao finished speaking, some of the Heavenly Tao's old monsters in the surrounding space immediately let out cold snorts. The pressure in their bodies deliberately spread out. This was clearly a response to Hong Tao's words. "I'm here to rob you? You shameless old man. How dare you call me a thief? I'm so angry." The blood-plume goshawk had a violent temperament, and now that it had come in anger, it stomped its feet in anger when it heard Hong Tao's accusation. Swoosh! Halfway through his words, he suddenly waved his hand, and a ray of light shot out, turning into a huge light screen in the space to his right. As the light screen flickered, an image gradually appeared. While the blood-plume goshawk's voice, filled with grief and indignation, sounded at this moment, and the entire space could be heard clearly. "Fellow Taoists, I came in anger today to unveil this old man's hypocritical face and let you see his true colors. More than a month ago, I gathered here with all of you. At that time, the old man instigated me to take out the 11 types of Heavenly Tao origin liquid in my hands and hand it to him for safekeeping temporarily. He said that when the master of the magic hall, Yi Xian, came in the future, he could help me refine the Heavenly Nine treasures liquid in front of me. This matter was rejected by me. After all, the Heavenly Tao origin liquid is not a small matter." I was not at ease. But I didn't expect that after this venerable left, this old fellow would immediately rush over and lie in ambush outside the forbidden area where this venerable resided. Once this venerable arrived, he would immediately make a move. I was careless and was seriously injured by him. I hurriedly fled and found a place to heal my injuries. Now that I have just recovered, I rushed here to reveal this matter. I'm afraid many of you have handed over the origin liquid in advance to him for safekeeping. Be careful not to hit a dog with meat buns. Puff! Hearing this, Hong Tao, who was caught off guard, was so angry that he almost vomited blood on the spot, and his neck was thick. Head in anger, he immediately raised his hand and pointed at the blood-plume goshawk, and angrily rebuked. "Blood-plume old monster, what are you trying to do today? You're the F** king dog. Your whole family are dogs. What the F** CK? Before his voice fell, an image appeared in the huge light screen in the distance to the right, causing Hong Tao's words to stop abruptly, and he was dumbfounded on the spot. Chapter 51-43. Puff! The words of the blood-feathered goshawk were really too infuriating. Caught off guard, Hong Tao almost spat out blood on the spot, and his neck was swollen. He raised his head. He pointed at the blood-feathered goshawk and scolded angrily. "What are you trying to do today? Old monster blood-plume. You are F** king slandering me. You are AF** king dog. Your whole family are dogs." Buzz! Before he finished speaking, an image appeared on the huge light screen in the distance to the right. Hong Tao subconsciously turned to look, and the words in his mouth stopped abruptly. His mind buzzed, and he was dumbfounded on the spot. He was completely stunned. In the image on the screen, Hong Tao's figure could be seen. In addition, there was the blood-feathered goshawk, and the figure of the blood-feathered goshawk was covered by a huge net. This net was one of Hong Tao's famous treasures, the simple star bag. Although it was just an image, this was, after all, recorded by the blood-feathered goshawk in the void after discovering Hong Tao's identity at that time. But with the means of the Heavenly Tao old monster, even if it was just an image, Hong Tao's aura was still very clear. There was absolutely no mistake. Roar! Why don't you roar? Are you dumbfounded? Your head is buzzing, right? You didn't expect that I would still use my means to record your sneak attack in such a critical situation, right? Seeing the image on the huge light screen, and then seeing Hong Tao's dumbfounded expression with his mouth wide open, the blood-feathered goshawk felt relieved. Following that, with a ferocious smile at the corner of his mouth, he turned to look around at the survivors and beasts who were also stunned. He raised his hand and pointed at Hong Tao, then he said, "Everyone, did you see it clearly? Who else can the old guy in the image be? That's his famed treasure, the simple star pocket. There's only one in the entire right section of the left bank. Other than that, my eagle eye is a powerful eye technique. My cultivation base is not weaker than his. If it was someone else who transformed, how could they escape from the power of my eye technique, the void glimpse and break illusion?" As soon as his words fell, there was an uproar in the void. The experts who were shocked by this scene finally came back to their senses at this time. All of them trembled violently as they gasped in horror. Soon, cries of horror rang out like a tide. Heavens, this is actually real. Like I said, the blood-feathered goshawk is not crazy. Why would it do something like this? Look at how angry it is. There must be a reason. Hiss. This is truly terrifying. Fellow Taoist Xueling didn't hand over the 11 portions of Heavenly Tao Essence Liquid. Yet he immediately set up an ambush. What about the portions that we handed over in advance and have already fallen into his hands? Don't tell me it's really a meat bun. There's really no return, right? This is inconvenient to speculate, but the image in the light screen is definitely not fake. We are all Heavenly Tao old monsters, so we can still see this point. Moreover, that is indeed the simple star bag, and Hong Tao's aura is not wrong. What's more, fellow Taoist Xueling's eagle eye is indeed an extremely powerful pupil technique. His cultivation has already reached the peak of the Heavenly Tao Great Circle of the 9th stage. If someone impersonated him, with his cultivation and pupil technique, how could he not see through it? Besides, there is no point in doing this. He is about to ambush fellow Taoist Xueling, so why spend so much effort to transform into Hong Tao's appearance? No, the Heavenly Tao Essence Liquid that this old man gave to Hong Tao is all that I have. There is absolutely no room for error. This old guy's credibility is questionable. I have to get it back first before I can be at ease. This is the key. This old man is also not at ease. Fellow Taoist Hong, quickly return this old man's origin liquid. At most, it will be refined later. This is not a small matter, and there is no room for error. This is not a risk. That's right, this old man has the same intention. Quickly return it. Roar, 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 roar. The old monsters of the Heavenly Tao who had gathered outside the Chaos Lac Star area, whether they were ferocious beasts of the starry sky or powerhouses of the remnant people, soon became noisy. They roared and kept clamoring, demanding Hong Tao to hand over the refining materials of the Heavenly 9 Treasures liquid that they had previously handed over. Hong Tao was on the verge of collapse at this moment. He stared blankly at the huge light curtain high in the void to his right with his mouth wide open. His eyes were straight, and his face was full of dullness. For a moment, even he himself was a little absent-minded. He wondered if he was sleepwalking and unconsciously went to ambush the blood-feathers goshawk. Because even if he looked at it from his point of view, he could not find anything suspicious. On the surface, this matter was clearly done by him. There was no doubt, and there was no way to explain it. In fact, even the old monsters of the Heavenly Tao behind him, who had just rushed out of the Chaos Lac Star area with him, had suspicious expressions on their faces at this time. These people were on the same side, and they were on the same side as Hong Quebec. How could they doubt this matter? It was imaginable how angry and wronged Hong Tao was. However, even if everyone did not believe it, Hong Tao himself knew that he did not do this at all. He was framed by others. But he could not say such words, because the facts were right in front of him. No matter how he argued, it was useless. On the contrary, it would make people more suspicious. They would think that he did not want to hand over the refining materials of the Heavenly 9 Treasures liquid. If that was the case, the Heavenly Tao ferocious beasts and the old monsters gathered outside the Chaos Lac Star area would definitely explode. Some of the more hot-tempered fellows would most likely attack immediately. When that time came, once the battle started, the situation would be out of control. No one could predict what kind of situation it would end up in. As these thoughts flashed through Hong Tao's mind, the flesh on his face immediately twitched. Although he was unwilling to hand over the refining materials of the Heavenly Nine Treasures liquid, based on the current situation, it was clear that he had no choice but to do so today. There was no way he could explain it at all. Furthermore, although he had temporarily handed over the 100 batches of Heavenly Nine Treasures elixir that he had collected in advance, when the Demon Palace's master, Yi Xian, arrived 10 months later, these fellows would still have to take it out in order to ask him to refine the Heavenly Nine Treasures elixir. At that time, the 20 bottles of Heavenly Nine Treasures liquid that belonged to the Chaos Lac Star area would still not be missing a single bottle. Fellow Taoists, this matter is strange, but this old man is indeed wronged. Thinking of this, Hong Tao secretly clenched his teeth and immediately cupped his fists towards the surroundings. An expression of grievance and anger appeared on his face as he continued, "But since you all don't believe this old man, it's useless to explain this matter. Back then, I did indeed collect nearly 100 batches of refining materials of the Heavenly Nine Treasures liquid in advance. Now I will return them to you all to prove this old man's innocence." Swish! Swish, swish, swish. As soon as he finished speaking, Hong Tao no longer hesitated. With a wave of his hand, a faint sound of something breaking through the air rang out. In an instant, streaks of light shot towards the Heavenly Tao old monsters who were waiting outside the Chaos Lac Star area. Swish! Swish, swish, swish. A faint sound of something breaking through the air rang out. As Hong Tao waved his hand, streaks of light shot towards the Heavenly Tao old monsters who were waiting outside the Chaos Lac Star area. Fellow Taoists, this matter is strange. This old man is indeed wronged. However, since you all don't believe this old man, it's useless to explain this matter. As he spoke, Hong Tao cupped his fists towards the surroundings. His expression was filled with endless grievance and anger. Back then, I did indeed collect nearly 100 batches of refining materials of the Heavenly Nine Treasures liquid in advance. Now I will return them to you all to prove this old man's innocence. After that, he did not stay any longer. With a cold snort, he flicked his sleeves and left with a gloomy expression. He turned around and entered the Chaos Lac Star area. As for the group of Heavenly Tao old monsters who were gathered outside the star area, they dispersed one after another and returned to the forbidden grounds and star areas behind them. Even the Blood Plume Goshawk did the same. After all, the 11 batches of Heavenly Tao origin liquid in his hands had not been lost. In addition, this time, Hong Tao had also been taught a lesson. He had lost all his face, so he could only quit while he was ahead. In the end, he still had to refine the Heavenly Nine Treasures liquid after 10 months. He couldn't really kill this old fellow, right? Moreover, he didn't have the strength to do so alone. Half a year passed in the blink of an eye. During this half a year, the entire right section of the left bank was in complete chaos. That day, after the Blood Plume Goshawk angrily exposed the true identity of Hong Tao, the person in charge of the Chaos Lac Star area, he had returned nearly 100 batches of refining materials of the Heavenly Nine Treasures liquid that he had collected in advance. Clang! When he was outside the Chaos Lac Star area, a portion of it was returned. After that, some of the Heavenly Tao old monsters who had paid in advance rushed to the Chaos Lac Star area after hearing the news and took away the refining materials they had paid in advance. Since then, the area outside the Chaos Lac Star area was deserted. However, the entire right section of the left bank would have fierce battles from time to time. The Heavenly Tao old monsters from various places would either act alone or in groups of 3 to 5. They would carry out all kinds of ambushes and hunts. There was even news that the Frost Blood Blue Crocodile, which was ranked 9th on the Heavenly Tao old monster list on the left bank, had been ambushed and killed not long after it arrived at the right section of the star area. This caused a huge uproar. Although no one knew who did this, there were rumors that it was very likely to be related to the Longjing. The old fellow was originally ranked 10th on the Heavenly Tao old monster list on the left bank. However, ever since he was defeated by the master of the magic hall, Yi Xian, he had gone crazy. There were 2 Heavenly Tao old monsters who saw him enter the Black Jackal Forbidden Land and kill 3 Heavenly Tao old monsters, including the evil-eyed Black Jackal. Even more so. As for the countless Heavenly Tao old monsters in the Black Jackal Forbidden Land, without exception, they were all killed by the Longjing and were completely wiped out. This caused another huge uproar. The situation in the right section of the left bank became even more serious. In this half a year, who knew how many Heavenly Tao old monsters died or were seriously injured in various ambushes? Yi Xian did not care about all of this at all. For half a year, he had been secretly making a fortune. While the water was completely chaotic, he took the opportunity to attack again and again. After he succeeded, He immediately left and continued to look for his next target. Half a year. In this year, almost 200 days, he would reap a harvest almost every 10 days. The amount of Heavenly Dao Old Monster Elixir in his hands was more or less. After half a year, Yi Xian already had 158 Heavenly Dao Blood Essences in his hands. He was only 4 away from the 162 required to refine 2 level 31 primordial pills. As for the Heavenly Dao Old Monster Elixir, he already had 120 types and 151 portions. He was only 11 portions away from the 162 portions required to refine 2 primordial pills. It was said that there were only 120 types of Heavenly Dao Old Monster Elixir in his hands. However, this did not matter. Refining 1 Heavenly Dao Old Monster Elixir only required 81 types of Heavenly Dao Old Monster Elixir. However, it was the same when refining the 2nd Heavenly Dao Old Monster Elixir. As long as the 81 portions of Heavenly Dao Old Monster Elixir were different, it would be fine. Also, in other words, any type of origin liquid in Yi Xian's hands, even if there were duplicate items, if there were only 2 of the same type, it would not affect him. If there were 3 of the same type, he would have to think of a way to secretly change them. As for this type of origin liquid that had 3 of the same type and needed to be changed, he had a total of 9 types of origin liquid in his hands, which was exactly the amount needed to refine a batch of Heavenly 9 Treasures elixir. 4 months later, he would go to the Chaos Starfield and help those Heavenly Dao Old Monsters refine a batch of origin liquid. At the same time, he would secretly change these 9 origin liquids, and everything would be settled. At this time, after half a year of continuous battles, Yi Xian had already returned to the dark void in front of him. The time for him to break through had arrived. In these 4 months, he would enter the abandoned planet where he was in seclusion and break through to the 3rd order of the Heavenly Dao. Swish! In front of him, the closed-door star could already be seen in the distance. A cold light flashed in Yi Xian's eyes, and he immediately rushed over, directly entering the core of the star. Following that, then, he waved his hand and took out the Shengnong treasured cauldron. It was only 10,000 feet in size, and it was suspended inside the core of the star. Its aura was concealed, and Yi Xian stepped into it. Swish, swish, swish! With a wave of his hand, along with a faint sound of breaking through the air, rays of light shot out and suspended in front of him. These were the cultivation resources that he took out from the undying world in his body to carry out this breakthrough. Without the slightest hesitation, with a flash of light in his eyes, Yi Xian immediately activated the power of the Shengnong Cauldron's domain. After compressing all the cultivation resources to the size of a nascent soul fist, he swallowed them into his stomach with a wave of his hand. Walala! The nascent soul fist ball melted as soon as it entered his mouth, and in the blink of an eye, it turned into a majestic river of energy that slowly flowed out of Yi Xian's body. The expected sound of chains also came from everywhere. At this time, the shackles that appeared within Yi Xian's body were the same as before. There was still only one of them. He focused his mind and used all his strength to activate the great river of energy that had just formed within his body, circulating it through the 100 meridians in his body time and time again. After an unknown amount of time, the huge river of energy formed in Yi Xian's meridians had been completely refined. Following that, after that, with just one impact, this incomparably thick shackles had already broken. The anticipated system prompt quickly sounded in Yi Xian's mind. Ding! Congratulations to the host. The ancient Dongshu method has broken through. Current realm. 3rd level of the Heavenly Dao. Ding! Congratulations to the host. The Qi and blood realm of the fleshly body has broken through. Current realm. 3rd level of the Heavenly Dao. In an instant, Yi Xian opened his eyes. In the depths of his eyes, a trace of excitement flashed and disappeared. Although, however, due to the suppression of the primordial Dao, after this breakthrough, his cultivation realm was still at the peak of the 9th stage Great Perfection Heavenly Dao under the 9th transformation of the Demonic Ape 9 transformations. However, due to the fact that he had broken through again, although his realm had not broken through, Yi Xian's true combat strength had clearly increased by a large margin. If he were to fight with the dragon whale again, even without using the fallen sky bow, he had absolute confidence that he would be able to kill this old fellow on the spot. It would not be just like last time, where he was seriously injured and had to flee. This time, although Yi Xian's cultivation realm in his strongest state was still the same, his true combat strength had clearly increased by a large margin once again. If he were to fight with the dragon whale again, even without using the fallen sky bow, he had absolute confidence that he would be able to kill that old fellow on the spot. It would not be like last time, where he was only seriously injured and had to flee. 3 months have actually passed? After calming down his agitated emotions, Yi Xian pinched his fingers and calculated. A faint light flashed in his eyes as he muttered softly. In that case, there is only 1 month left to the 1-year agreement. As for the Heavenly Way origin liquid, there are now more than 120 types and 151 portions. There are still 11 portions left to refine the 162 primordial pills that are required to refine 2 level 31 primordial pills. Speaking of this, he seemed to have suddenly thought of something, and a blazing light instantly burst out from his eyes. If I remember correctly, the blood plume goshawk that ambushed under the identity of Hong Tao had exactly 11 portions of the Heavenly Way origin liquid in its hands. At this moment, Yi Xian made a decision. He would take advantage of this 1 month to make one last move. He would kill the blood plume goshawk that had 11 portions of the Heavenly Way origin liquid and seize the origin liquid in its hands. Swoosh! After making the decision, Yi Xian did not hesitate any longer. He stood up and stepped out of the mouth of the farmer god cauldron that was enshrouded in 9-colored fog. Then, he waved his hand and kept the cauldron into his body. Swoosh! After rushing out of the core of the abandoned star where he was in seclusion, he immediately waved his hand. A crack appeared in the void with a crisp sound of cloth tearing. Yi Xian rushed into it and disappeared in the blink of an eye. Goshawk, Eagle Pool, also known as the Blood Plume Forbidden Land, was where the Blood Plume Goshawk's nest was located. Ever since it went to the Chaos Starfield more than half a year ago and exposed Hong Tao's true identity in front of everyone, the Blood Plume Goshawk returned to Eagle Pool and never went out again. By right now, the left bank and right bank were too chaotic. Dangers lurked everywhere in the void. Who knew if a few Heavenly Way ferocious beasts would suddenly appear and kill people to steal their treasures? Even the Frostblood Blue Crocodile that was ranked 9th on the Heavenly Way ferocious beast list on the left bank had silently fallen. One could imagine how dangerous it was. He was different from others. Those Heavenly Way old monsters who were either alone or in groups of 3 to 5 had no choice. They wanted the Heavenly Way 9 elixir of the Great Tao, but they did not have enough Heavenly Way origin liquid, so they could only grit their teeth and take the risk. But he had a total of 11 types of Heavenly Way origin liquid. It was more than enough to refine a cauldron of Heavenly Way 9 elixir of the Great Tao. There was no need to take this risk. Furthermore, it was precisely because he had too much Heavenly Tao origin liquid in his possession that he was more likely to be targeted by those red-eyed fellows. The reason why the blood-feathered goshawk had not taken a single step out during this half a year was due to its careful consideration. However, the 1-year deadline was approaching. There was only 1 month left, so he naturally could not continue to lie in the Blood Plume Forbidden Land. It was time to move out and head to the Chaos Starfield. At this time, he still did not know that just a day ago, the master of the magic hall, Yi Xian, had silently snuck into the Blood Plume Forbidden Land. He was 200 billion kilometers away from the Forbidden Land, in the direction of the Chaos Starfield. He had set up an ambush. This was the last time Yi Xian would make a move. There was only 1 month left. He was certain that the Blood Plume Goshawk would definitely walk out of the Blood Plume Forbidden Land. So Yi Xian had already activated the strongest form of his 3-headed, 6-armed devil ape true body before coming here. At this moment, his body was millions of kilometers large. Now that he was lying in ambush, he had already fully activated the perfect oscillation secret technique. His figure and aura were completely restrained, and he was just waiting for the appearance of his prey. Whoosh! After waiting for another 5 days, a faint sound of something breaking through the air suddenly came from the Blood Plume Forbidden Land in front of him. A ray of light shot out from the Forbidden Land, and the invisible aura of cultivation that spread out was that of the peak of the 9th stage Great Perfection Heavenly Way. Blood. The Blood Plume Goshawk. This old fellow had been stalling for so long, but he had finally appeared. As these thoughts flashed through his mind, a cold light flashed in Yi Xian's eyes. He immediately rushed forward, and the power in his body was instantly pushed to the limit. Crack! Screech! In the next moment, the black fog doppelganger of the 3 great demon bodies suddenly raised its head and let out an earth-shattering screech. At the same time, the spirit source core that was suspended above the sea of consciousness in his mind began to operate rapidly again. A huge blood-colored lightning bolt with a diameter of millions of kilometers suddenly appeared above the Blood Plume Goshawk's head, and it was instantly struck into confusion. Before he could react, a formless spirit power instantly spread out like a tsunami and enveloped the Blood Plume Goshawk's entire body. Black the Fog doppelganger used a spirit power secret technique, but it wasn't the spirit vortex or the annihilation spear. Instead, it used the spiritual lightning technique and spiritual crush at the same time. Spiritual crush was a spirit secret technique that used spirit power to form a mental attack. Compared to the divine sense attacks of human cultivators, spirit power was more traceless, so it was basically impossible to guard against. Now, this blood-plume goshawk was suddenly struck by the blood-colored lightning bolt with a diameter of millions of kilometers. While his consciousness was in a daze, he was instantly struck by spiritual crush, and he was stunned on the spot. Although, this state could only last for 1 or 2 breaths, but it was enough for Yi Xian. Bang! At the same time, Yi Xian, who was in the true form of the 3-headed 6-armed demon ape, appeared beside the blood-plume goshawk. A cold light flashed in the ape's eyes, and when he suddenly swung his right hand, a loud noise shook the sky. Big the black cudgel smashed down without hesitation, landing squarely on the blood-plume goshawk's head. Although the old man's cultivation wasn't weak, there was still a certain gap between him and Yi Xian. In the face of Yi Xian's all-out attack, coupled with the fact that his mind was in a daze, he didn't have time to react. His entire huge body exploded the moment the black cudgel landed, turning into a scarlet mist of blood that spread out. Phew! Overjoyed, Yi Xian immediately waved his hand. The howling of the wind immediately resounded, and an incomparably majestic and invisible force roared out, sweeping up the majestic blood mist that was spreading out. It directly sent it to the bottom of the central region volcano in the space inside the cauldron, starting the blood essence condensation. As a result, the heavenly Tao blood essence in Yi Xian's hands had increased by 1 more. Previously, he had already reached 158, but now, he had reached 159. And this time, the harvest was obviously not just that. As the blood-plume goshawk's body exploded, there were still 11 weak rays of light in the vast blood mist that was swept over. These rays of light were precisely 11 portions of heavenly Tao origin liquid. After harvesting them, the amount of heavenly Tao origin liquid in Yi Xian's hands had reached 162 portions, which was exactly the amount needed to refine 2 level 31 grand mist pellets. Only however, there were 9 types of heavenly Tao origin liquid in 3 portions. But this didn't matter. When he returned to the Chaos Starfield, Yi Xian only needed to refine a cauldron of the heavenly Tao 9 Great Tao Elixir, and he would be able to quietly replace these 9 identical heavenly Tao Elixir. After killing the blood-plume goshawk, Yi Xian's heavenly Tao blood essence had increased by 1 more. Previously, he had already reached 158, but now, he had reached 159. Refining 2 cauldrons of level 31 grand mist pellets were still short of 3. As for the heavenly Tao origin liquid, there were 162 portions, which was exactly the amount needed to refine 2 grand mist pellets. Although, it was said that there were 9 types of heavenly Tao elixir in 3 portions, but this didn't matter. When he returned to the Chaos Starfield, Yi Xian only needed to refine a cauldron of the heavenly Tao elixir, and he would be able to quietly replace these 9 identical heavenly Tao elixir. Just for this purpose alone, he had to make a trip to the Chaos Starfield. What's more, he was the one who had originally promised this 1-year agreement. Even if it was impossible for him to refine the heavenly Tao elixir for Hong Tao for a long time as Hong Tao had hoped, this 1-year agreement still had to be fulfilled. Calculating the time, there were only a little over 20 days left before the 1-year agreement was reached. Although it would only take a little over 10 days to reach Hong Tao Starfield from here, if he leisurely rushed over, he would be able to arrive on time on the agreed date. Swish! With these thoughts flashing through his mind, Yi Xian immediately moved. He returned to his human form, but he was still in the state of the 9th transformation of the 9 transformations of the demonic ape. He also activated the perfect spiritual power secret technique, concealed his figure and aura, and transformed into an invisible ray of light that shot out. Hong K. Starfield. Since the arrival of the blood-plume goshawk half a year ago and the public exposure of Hong Tao's true colors, the nearly 100 furnaces of the heavenly Tao elixir that he had collected in advance were all taken back. Since then, the Chaos Starfield, which was originally full of guests, had become deserted. This situation only changed again not long ago. Half a month ago, guests had arrived one after another in the Chaos Starfield. All of them were the heavenly Tao's old monsters from the left bank and the right bank. There were heavenly Tao's ferocious beasts from the Ferocious Beasts Forbidden Grounds, and there were also old monsters from the Remnant Starfield. Of course, in addition to these heavenly Tao's old monsters, there were also some powerful figures and desolate supremacies. However, at this moment, in this kind of situation, the so-called powerful figures and desolate supremacies could only be considered as juniors and subordinates who came to watch the ceremony. They had no right to speak at all and had to tuck their tails between their legs. Today was the one-year agreement between the master of the magic hall, Yi Xian, and the heavenly Dao's old monsters from the left bank and the right bank would expire. Today, the Chaos Starfield would definitely welcome a grand occasion that was rarely seen in the entire left bank. Half a year ago, over the past few months, the heavenly Dao's old monsters from the left bank and the right bank had arrived one after another. However, none of them entered the Chaos Starfield. Instead, they waited in the dark void outside the Starfield. Waiting for the arrival of the master of the magic hall, Yi Xian. Now, almost everyone had arrived. After all, these heavenly Dao's old monsters' goal was to invite the master of the magic hall, Yi Xian, to refine the heavenly Dao elixir. Since they had a request, they naturally couldn't put on airs and come late. Half a year ago, as far as the eye could see, there were at least 1,000 heavenly Dao ferocious beasts and old monsters from the right half of the Chaos K Starfield in the vast expanse of dark void that was 1 trillion kilometers in circumference. If one were to count the almighties and desolate supremacies who were following behind them as juniors or subordinates who came to watch the ceremony, the number of figures in the void numbered in the thousands. These were more than 10,000 almighties who were all above the primordial age. Although there were some who came from the left bank and the middle bank, more than 90% of them were from the right bank. Only just in the right bank of the left bank, there were already so many almighties and old monsters. Moreover, not all of them had arrived today because many of them were still in seclusion in the parallel void. They didn't know what was going on in the outside world. Just this alone showed how strong the left bank was. Clang! Of course, part of the reason was that the conditional opening of the Milky Way starfield was getting closer and closer. The old monsters who had been in seclusion in the parallel void or other regions all came out one after another. For example, today, although there were more than 1,000 heavenly Dao's old monsters in the right bank gathered outside the Chaos Starfield, there were many new faces among them. They must have just come out of the parallel void in the past year. A year ago, when Yi Xian was undergoing the elixir tribulation, more than 1,000 heavenly Dao's old monsters had gathered in the dark void in front of the right bank. Now, some of them were missing. They were either killed or seriously injured in the hunt. Now, they were healing and couldn't come at all. This was what it should be. The entire right section of the left bank hadn't been peaceful for the past year. Occasionally, there would be killings, and even Yi Xian had taken advantage of the situation to kill quite a few old monsters of the heavenly Dao. The heavenly Dao's old monsters gathered here. Some of them were familiar with each other. Since they had nothing to do, they would talk to each other from time to time. Over the past year, the situation in the right bank's void had been extremely tense. It was unknown how many heavenly Dao's old monsters had been secretly killed. It was no longer a secret that the frost-blood blue crocodile, which was ranked 9th on the left bank's heavenly Dao's ferocious beast list, had been killed. There were rumors in secret that this was very likely done by Long Jing, who was ranked 10th on the left bank's heavenly Dao's ferocious beast list. After all, there weren't many heavenly Dao experts in the right bank who had the ability to do so. Furthermore, Long Jing had planned ahead of time and launched a sneak attack. It was barely possible for him to do so. Furthermore, someone had seen Long Jing silently exterminate an entire forbidden land for ferocious beasts. Apart from the heavenly Dao ferocious beasts guarding it, even the ferocious beasts below the heavenly Dao realm were slaughtered and completely wiped out. However, it was obvious how crazy he was. Therefore, the possibility of him attacking the frost-blood blue crocodile was very high. In fact, Long Jing did not come. This clearly indicated the problem and made people even more suspicious of him. This was because since he had silently exterminated a forbidden land, his goal was to collect the heavenly Dao origins liquid. However, he did not appear. It was clearly a sign that he had a guilty conscience. Many heavenly Dao old monsters were discussing this matter and gradually came to a consensus. Almost everyone was certain that Long Jing was the mastermind behind the assassination of the frost-blood blue crocodile. Yes. Hong Tao didn't care about any of this. At this moment, he was standing in the void at the edge of the Chaos Lac Starfield. Behind him were more than 20 figures. They were the other heavenly Dao old monsters in the Chaos Lac Starfield. As for the remnant citizens of the stellar domain below the heavenly Dao realm, they did not appear at all. As the host, Hong Tao should have sent some remnant citizens of the stellar domain to set up seats in the void for such a grand occasion. He should have prepared some spirit wine and spirit fruits as a form of hospitality. However, he did not do so. Although he appeared with more than 20 heavenly Tao old monsters from the Chaos K stellar domain, he kept a straight face and did not converse with the crowd. Clearly, he was still brooding over the matter from half a year ago and was displeased. Rip. It was also at that moment that a ripping sound came from the void to his right. A void rift appeared and Yi Xian walked out with a smile on his face.